Good evening from Los Angeles. I'm Dan Rather, joining you this week from the Young Turks West Coast studios. We are now less than 1 month out from President Trump's self-imposed deadline to start deporting undocumented immigrants brought here as children. The deadline is using dreamers as ransom to force a broader immigration deal from Congress. Remember, Congress is not the pivot on which this all turns. Immigration, after all, was President Trump's signature issue on the campaign trail. It was Donald Trump's searing anti-immigrant venom that propelled him to the White House. And now this week is shaping up to be the culmination of the raging national battle he ignited. The fate of more than 2 million dreamers is at stake. The future of millions more undocumented immigrants. The hopes of untold millions around our globe, hoping one day to call America their home. All of it, the trajectory of all those lives, will be determined by whether President Trump will jettison his anti-immigrant political base. His official budget released today still calls for $18 billion for the wall, and his official immigration proposal last week called for $25 billion to pay for, quote, a border wall system. But we learned this weekend that at least some in the White House are open to compromise. The Los Angeles Times reported that White House officials are open to keeping immigration at its current levels, letting dreamers stay and clearing the backlog of undocumented immigrants seeking residency. In other words, a total betrayal of the xenophobia that gave Donald Trump the White House. Hypocrisy, but you might say it's of the very best kind. Whether President Trump will stick to this floated compromise, of course, should always be a cause for concern. But Republican leaders in Congress so far seem to be honoring their pledge to Democrats, a pledge for an open debate on immigration, not necessarily out of the goodness of their hearts. The party's business wing is eager for hardworking, low-paid labor, among other things. Their hope this week is that President Trump will not give in yet again to what they consider the small-minded fears of those who define America by skin color, language, and religion. Those who don't understand that what truly makes America great is not diminished, but made mighty as we increase our diversity. For all the noise and vitriol directed against immigrants, it turns out America has already come together on this very issue. Most Americans, including Republicans, already agree on immigration. Most of us want to open the doors of America to those who would be American. This week, we will see whether this Congress still understands the country it represents and what makes it great. The Defense Department is planning a national military parade at the request of the Commander-in-Chief. Yes, one of those breast-beating military show-offs we scoff at North Korea for holding for their maximum leader, the kind of thing that was a regular occurrence in the old Soviet Union and has long been associated with tin-horn dictators everywhere. We are still at war, and President Trump wants to hold a victory parade. American troops remain in harm's way, and the president wants us to celebrate. We can all agree America's armed forces deserve more recognition than they get, also better pay, education, and social services. But is this the way to do it? Seriously? For 17 years, American soldiers have fought for us as we move the goalposts on them. Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, terrorism, evil itself. Those who serve honorably deserve to be honored, far above our poor power to do so. But remember, America's soldiers do get parades. Modest affairs usually, Main Street tributes to hometown heroes at times such as the 4th of July and Veterans Day. We know these parades are about their service because we can see their faces as they see ours. But what inspired President Trump's vision for a national extravaganza of a military parade? It was not the service of Americans in uniform. It was a French military parade he attended last year.
It was one of the greatest parades I've ever seen. It was 2 hours on the button, and it was military might, and I think a tremendous thing for France and for the spirit of France. And people don't. They are in France. But when you see that and you see all the victories, it was a tremendous thing. And to a large extent, because of what I witnessed, we may do something like that.
He said he wanted, quote, to try to top it, unquote. And if you wonder who President Trump sees as the honoree in such events, consider what he wrote about that French parade. Congratulations, he wrote to President Emmanuel Macron. Congratulations, not to the troops, to the president. These parades dazzle us with gleaming machines, painting combat as kind of fun and exciting, turning soldiers invisible, camouflaging casualties and the savagery of war. They glorify only the military institution and whoever leads it. I know because I saw it firsthand in North Korea at a military parade in 2005. I have no desire to see it in America in 2018. Such a thing is not who we are and what we are. Past American presidents saw military power as a sword. Best to speak softly while you carry a big stick. Today, America has never possessed greater military might, but never has traditional military might seemed to matter less than against the foes we now face. And never have we turned our eye from the battlefield, as the president insists that we do now. Today, those who claim to support the troops do so against the backdrop of war zones we know little or nothing about, in countries we cannot name, for causes we cannot fathom. At a time when we grow ever more distant from the bloodshed in our name, more distant from our military history and tradition, from military families and veterans, we as a people have turned our backs on the front lines and hidden battlefields where our warriors fight and sometimes die. We do not demand answers for their deaths at sea, in Yemen or Niger. We little note the defeat of ISIS in Iraq. We do not mark the activation of the 1st Security Force Assistance Brigade at Fort Benning last week, bound for Afghanistan this spring. We do not hunt for news about US troops taking fire last week in Syria. We turn our eyes and close our minds to the immense sacrifices of blood and treasure in wars without end. Forget about it. Just go to the mall and shop. Only a few politicians object to waging war in Syria and elsewhere without the congressional approval our Constitution demands. Even fewer voters care. So if our military have earned parades and more, the real question is, have we? How can we offer them a parade when we have yet to bring them home? By what right do we celebrate a military we ignore? to take pleasure in service we do not bother to follow, in sacrifice we do not share. By what right do we rejoice in victories about which we know nothing? And if we have not earned, if we do not deserve a national military parade, in what conceivable way has our president? A White House in chaos with women in the crosshairs. That's still ahead. Plus, the looting of Puerto Rico is now underway. So stay with us. I see what we all see. The deep divisions, the endemic injustices, the uncertainty about our future. We have sometimes stumbled. We have sometimes fallen short. But we can renew our national purpose if we recognize that what unites us is far greater and stronger than all that divides us.
Look, we're doing interviews over there at youtube.com/TYT interviews, and we've done some amazing ones recently.
So now, of course, you know the person most widely considered to be the most progressive senator is Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
Why not back him during the 2016 primaries? Why be a Democrat at all?
And we're in the time where you cannot, in good conscience, sit on the sidelines of history.
It is the longest, biggest, worst blackout in American history, and it will not end soon. 400,000 people in Puerto Rico still have no electrical power, more than a quarter of the residents. Just last night, a substation blew, knocking out power for still more people. Last week's U.S. federal spending bill offered help, only a fraction of what Puerto Rico needs. Puerto Rico, in other words, remains on her knees, in the dark, suffocating under debt and austerity measures that predate Hurricane Maria. Wall Street descended on Puerto Rico well before the great hurricane, squeezing the island's investments in its people to win payoffs for investors. But there is still much of value in Puerto Rico, even after Maria. And disasters, as we all know, breed corruption and profiteering. The vultures can smell it, even in the dark. So now they're circling. And Puerto Rico, strapped for cash, honeycombed with corruption, is putting out welcome mats. The Commonwealth, in other words, is preparing to sell off what little remains of its commonwealth. Last month, Governor Ricardo Rossello proposed selling off Puerto Rico's public power utility. With 22,000 students gone to the mainland U.S., maybe forever, the Puerto Rican government is also looking now at privatizing schools, including the University of Puerto Rico. But privatizing problems is no guarantee of solving them. Last week, we learned that FEMA paid a private contractor to provide 30 million meals for Puerto Ricans in need. But when the first delivery, 18 million meals, was due, only 50,000 showed up, and the packaging made them unfit to eat. It's a safe bet Wall Street will make money somehow if Puerto Rico privatizes power and education. Less certain, though, is whether it profits Puerto Rico's people. To keep track of that, the human margins as they struggle to recover from the storm, we need good information, hard data. Who lives in the areas without power? What resources do they have? What do they need? Who needs help elsewhere? Puerto Rico collects that kind of vital information through the Institute of Statistics, information that is the functioning DNA of any responsive government, knowing its people, to serve its people. But now Puerto Rico's legislature is about to consider reorganizing the Institute of Statistics. And the data collection the Institute does will be privatized too. If it happens, then the information we and Puerto Rico needs to gauge the effect of profit motives on public service will now be in the hands of the private sector. The move has been opposed by 15 members of Congress and the American Statistical Association. Because Puerto Rico is vulnerable right now, and the scavengers are hoping to do their work out of sight, no one is watching, no one is counting, no one keeping track. In Puerto Rico, Wall Street, or Washington, thieves prefer to work in the dark. It's our job, our responsibility, to keep the power on and shine a light.
All right, well, the Young Turks special election day coverage dropping.
An amazing power panel.
Look at this panel. You want to talk about power?
Like a smart Destiny's Child.
We're all too strong.
We start a revolution. Yes, another one.
Aren't you excited?
Wow.
And some of the best writers in the country are right here on this panel, with the obvious exception of John Irola.
Let's not so quickly discount Harry Potter fan fiction.
We have elected the top Twitter troll in the country.
What ran me away from Christianity was judgment and condemnation.
Assaulting peaceful protesters in North Dakota, crazier than bombing Yemen, crazier than bombing Syria so much they ran out of bombs.
Reductive interpretation of what their motives are, what Putin's are, by these amateur experts.
It's just we don't kill our journalists, and they do.
I know what you're thinking.
I love how you do something with your lips when you play the sound clips.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Look at his lips.
I was a woman.
No, you're closing your mouth. Usually I'll be like, and I'm like, is he like lip syncing it?
I don't know. I never noticed it until you said it.
It's a funny habit.
It's not human intelligence.
TYT member.
They're kicking me out the door. They're kicking me out the door.
Look, we're doing interviews over there at youtube.com/TYT interviews, and we've done some amazing ones recently.
So now, of course, you know the person most widely considered to be the most progressive senator is Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
Why not back him during the 2016 primaries? Why be a Democrat at all?
And we're in a time where you cannot, in good conscience, sit on the sidelines of history in 2017. Right.
Washington may be consumed with the fate of White House Chief of Staff John Kelly, but with or without him, the Trump administration still has a problem. Because the Rob Porter wife-beating scandal that has the White House under siege is a heat-seeking missile to the heart of many of President Trump's biggest fears and vulnerabilities. It reminds everyone that Mr. Trump, too, has been credibly accused of assault by multiple women. There have been several other people close to Trump accused of sexual and physical assault. There are dozens of people working in the White House still without full security clearances, including the president's son-in-law. A chief of staff who was brought in to create order is now spreading chaos. Mr. Trump's vow to bring in only, quote, the best people to work with him rings hollow, and his administration is having a tough time finding people to work in the White House. Meanwhile, the incredible cocoon of privilege and ego with which the president envelops himself blinds him to the sheer horror of his statements in defense of Mr. Porter. The president rails against the injustice of these accusations. This from a man who accused President Obama of being a foreigner. Mr. Trump talks about how, quote, people's lives are being shattered and destroyed by mere allegation. But he says nothing about the women victims. What about the lives of these women? Have they not been shattered and destroyed? And what about the lives of all of the women and men suffering in domestic violence situations? Mr. Trump once again proves he is indifferent to the fate of anyone other than himself. This is the low for this country that is nothing about politics. Listen, we can debate tax cuts and immigration policy and how we fund education. We can disagree about the size of our military or the best balance for protecting the environment. That is democracy. Debating whether credibly accused wife beaters should be allowed the honor, and that's what it is, to serve in the White House isn't democracy. It's a kind of madness and a moment of sadness for the country. It's also a moment of fear for many young people, especially. My thoughts for them after this.
All right, well, the Young Turks special election day coverage dropping.
An amazing power panel.
Look at this panel. You want to talk about power?
Like a smart Destiny's Child.
We're all too strong.
We start a revolution. Yes, another one.
Aren't you excited?
Wow. And some of the best writers in the country are right here on this panel, with the obvious exception of John Irola.
Let's not so quickly discount Harry Potter fan fiction.
We have elected the top Twitter troll in the country.
What ran me away from Christianity was judgment and condemnation.
Assaulting peaceful protesters in North Dakota, crazier than bombing Yemen, crazier than bombing Syria so much they ran out of bombs.
Reductive interpretation of what their motives are, what Putin's are, by these amateur experts.
It's just beyond. We don't kill our journalists, and they do.
Here's some other stories we're keeping an eye on and think you should. President Trump today finally unleashed his 10-year, $1.5 trillion infrastructure plan to fix the nation's crumbling highways and bridges and largely ignore mass transit. The plan calls for the feds to put up $200 billion. The rest, the White House says, it hopes will come from states and cities. But folks, it's an election year and Congress may be reluctant to pass anything that costs this much. So infrastructure may have to wait. Although President Trump is planning to stop funding the International Space Station, the Washington Post reports today's new budget calls for $150 million to save it. How? By using that money to transition the space station away from government control and into corporate hands. The plan does not say why the private sector might want a space station, except to speculate that its future landlord could someday charge NASA rent as, quote, one of many customers, unquote. Israel today said it will continue to carry out military strikes in Syria after a weekend in which Israel lost its first fighter jet to enemy fire in decades. It began with an Iranian drone crossing from Syria into Israel airspace, a charge Iran denies. From there, the thing escalated rapidly, with Syrian fire taking down an Israeli F-16 and Israel claiming to take out half of Syria's air defenses in response. Although ISIS is fading, the growing presence of international players in Syria is eye-opening. Russia, Iran, Turkey, the United States. This is no longer a pressure cooker, folks. It's a time bomb, with precious little being done to defuse it. Purdue Pharma, the company that brought us OxyContin, says it will stop pushing the painkiller to doctors. The company is being sued by states and local governments for igniting the opioid epidemic by engineering painkillers patients would come to need. In 2016, opioids killed an estimated 53,000 people, 72% of those using prescription drugs. President Trump has followed up on a few of the recommendations made by the committee he put together on opioid abuse. He said last week his approach to get really, really tough with drug dealers is proceeding. On Friday, we should note, President Trump nominated Jim Carroll as America's next drug czar, heading up the Office of National Drug Control Policy. Carroll's resume does not include any public health experience. The White House says he dealt with drug-related issues as a prosecutor in Virginia. In closing, this is personal. as it often is with the work I'm trying to do now. That work is trying to provide a steady, reliable, experienced voice of reason to events in our country and, for that matter, in the world. The effort includes trying to put what's happening into some context and perspective, especially historical perspective. I haven't been everywhere and done everything, not nearly. But now, 86 years old and a working reporter for almost 70 of those years, I have been a lot of places, covered a lot of stories, and a fair amount of history. That doesn't make me an expert on anything. It may help a little in the effort to contribute some context and perspective. I have no illusions. Mine is a small, really microscopic effort. And I'm bound to fail some, if not a lot of the time, bound to make mistakes and misjudgments. With all that in mind, let me leave you tonight with this. There's a new book out titled How Democracies Die.
All right, welcome to the Young Turks. So we had a little bit of technical issue with the Dan Rather show at the end there. We shot it out of LA today. It's a shame because we had a wonderful handoff here where Dan Rather and I got to do an exchange. Some of you will get to see that at some point, presumably. So by the way, Dan Rather's show is always on our main channel, youtube.com/TYT. Check that out every week if you miss any portion of it. It's also available for our members. So tytnetwork.com/join. You could always watch or listen to Dan Rather's show, which I love. I think it's great perspective and context, and I want to make sure you watch the whole thing. So we'll get that up for members as soon as possible and up on YouTube and Facebook as well. So now a little bit later in this program, Trump's budget is in. Did he keep his promises? Well, we've got some tape on that and we have numbers on it. We'll break it down for you guys, unlike anyone else in media. But the story I really don't want you to miss today is the story of an American hero. We're gonna do it in the next segment. You're gonna love her. What she did and how politicians reacted to her is awesome. Now, how the politicians reacted is despicable, but it is very telling. All right, and then speaking of politicians, Democratic Party, how they are courting corporate sponsors. That's a little later in the program and painful. Okay, and maybe towards the end when Anna comes in, a little bit of justice depending on your perspective. So all that on today's show and more. But let me start with Fire and Fury because I've got some rage that I got to share with you guys. Let's go over here. Okay. Well, we've got a great little story here. It starts out super sweet. Let me tell you all about it. I know it's a local story, but it's nice to warm the heart every once in a while. Jocelyn Morphy returned to work at St. Peter and Paul Catholic School in Miami on Wednesday after marrying her wife, Natasha Haas, in the Florida Keys. Well, that's lovely. In fact, here they are. We got a picture. Reminds me of my own wedding because we also did it down in South Florida and also on the beach. Very similar. Well, this is a lovely story. All right, so why am I telling you this? Well, because of the next sentence. The following day, she was terminated after refusing to resign. Okay, Jocelyn says, this weekend I married the love of my life and unfortunately I was terminated from my job as a result. In their eyes, I'm not the right kind of Catholic for my choice in partner. Okay, well, we're going to get into the right kind of Catholic here, and I'm going to explain, and I'm going to hold them accountable. So first, though, let's be fair and hear from the school. Principal Carlotta Morales called Morphy's dismissal a difficult, yet, quote, necessary decision in a letter sent home to parents of Saints Peter and Paul. A fuller comment here from the school goes from Mary Ross Agosta. It's actually from the Archdiocese of Miami. They explain, one has to understand that in any corporation, institution, or organization, there are policies and procedures and teachings and traditions that are adhered to. If something along the way does not continue to stay within that contract, then we have no other choice. So both the Archdiocese and the school saying that we didn't have a choice. We didn't have a choice. Now I'm going to argue that they did have a choice. First, let's be fair. Let's quote Leviticus. So in Leviticus, it says, "You shall not lie with a male as one lies with a female. It is an abomination." Well, that seems crystal clear. So what's our issue here? It's a Catholic high school. They've got a right to set their rules. We got freedom of religion in this country, and it is what it is. So it's an abomination. Homosexuality is. You can extrapolate women lying with women is also an abomination. That's Leviticus 18:22. But I wanted to quote another part of Leviticus, if I might. And I'm sure that since they care about the Bible so much, I'm sure that they'll grant me that. Funny enough, it's also Leviticus. Let me read you that. "These you may eat, whatever is in the water, and all that have fins and scales. Those in the water, in the seas, or in the rivers, you may eat. But whatever is in the seas and in the rivers that does not have fins and scales among all the teeming life of the water, and among all the living creatures that are in the water, they are detestable things to you, and they shall be abhorrent to you. You may not eat of their flesh, and their carcasses you shall detest. Whatever in the water does not have fins and scales is abhorrent to you. Well, that seems equally clear. So that's the shellfish provision in Leviticus. So shrimp, lobsters, crabs, oysters, we can go on and on. So I assume that the good folks here in the Catholic high school in Miami have fired everyone who's ever eaten shrimp at the school. Oh, they haven't. Oh, that's weird, because I thought they cared about the Bible. I thought that this was all about the Bible and how they had no choice. They have no choice. They have to follow what the Bible says. Well, it says, you shall not eat shellfish. It is abhorrent to you. It's as clear on that provision as it is about a man shall not lie with a man. So what's your excuse? You have no excuse. So I know what the standard circular logic of the religious are, and it doesn't matter which religion, they do it every time. In this case, it happens to be Catholics, and they'll say, no, but no, the Old Testament doesn't apply anymore because of the New Testament. And then, wait, oh, the Old Testament doesn't apply anymore. Wonderful, that a man shall lie with a man. No, but that one's clear. What do you mean? The shellfish thing's absolutely clear. Well, but that's only in the Old Testament. Good, you just told me the Old Testament doesn't apply. Did Jesus ever talk about homosexuality or a man not lying with a man? No, Jesus never mentioned it. That's New Testament. In the New Testament, it doesn't. Jesus doesn't talk about it. But. Oh, by the way, Genesis, Adam and Eve, that's in the Old Testament. I guess we crumple that up and throw it in the garbage, right? Noah's Ark, apparently that was a lot of BS. That's in the Old Testament. Which one is it? Do you believe in the Old Testament or don't you believe in the Old Testament? Because in the Old Testament, it is absolutely clear. If you eat shellfish, you are a terrible person. It should be abhorrent to you. God and Yahweh are furious at you, just as mad as if you lie with a man. But no, they like shrimp, they like red lobster, they got the nice cheesy biscuits. They don't want to do that. That's a pain in their ass. So that part of the Bible, they burn, they ignore, they crumple up. But the part focused on hatred of others, ooh, they love that part. So they got every right to do it any way they like. They're a private school, they're not a public school. They better not take a dollar of my money, because I don't agree to their hatred. I don't agree to their fear. I don't agree to their bigotry. So they better not take $1 from the public in Florida. And if they do, then we should regulate them, because we believe in equality because we're America. That's in our Constitution. You don't believe in equality? Okay, you got freedom of religion. Can you just be a little bit less hypocritical about it? Because you don't follow the Bible. You think you follow everything in the New Testament? Go read the New Testament, let alone the Old Testament. You don't follow it. The priests there, the nuns there, the archdiocese there, the principals there, the teachers there, they don't follow it word for word. So why focus on one issue? Because it's hatred of others. What is fundamentalist religion for, if not for hatred of others? Look, luckily, not all of the parents agree. 20 of them went down there to demand an explanation, and I'm going to quote one of them for you. Rochelle Martin said, "We send our kids here because we want them to learn the message of love. I truly believe that Jesus' message is about love, compassion, and acceptance, and this is the opposite, and that is very upsetting." So let me be fair to Catholics and Christians the world over, because there are some great parts in the Bible, as there are in all the books, and there are some terrible parts in the books. It is true. Just read it. If you don't believe me, pick it up, turn to any page. But the Jesus message, the Temple on the Mount, is a wonderful message. So you as a Christian or a Catholic, you have a choice. The school had a choice. The archdiocese have a choice. Do you focus on the great parts of the book about love and compassion? Or do you focus on the fearful and the hateful parts of the book? Well, this school has made a decision. Now, what you want to do with that decision is up to you. So if you're the public in Florida, you should not give $1 to these folks. If you're a Catholic, do you want to send your kids to a school that focuses on the hate rather than the love? That is your call to make. It's a free country. They have a right to focus on the hate, and you have a right not to go there. They have made their decision. They have lied down and made their bed. Now it's time for you to make a decision. And this doesn't just apply to this one school. Any preacher, whether they're Protestant or Catholic or Muslim or anything else, that tells you to focus on the parts that divide us in those texts, be wary. Any preacher or imam or rabbi that tells you to focus on the love and the compassion and the looking out for the needy, those are the ones that I would frequent, because the rest of those preachers are giving religion a really, really bad name. And so is this school. I hope that this lovely couple is all right. I hope the teacher finds a new job, one where she is accepted and appreciated for who she is and what she does. Okay, I think I've been clear on that. Now, by the way, you got a hypocrite in your life, a religious hypocrite telling you to hate others and discriminate against others. Ask him about shrimp. You know, I used to say it as a joke. It ain't no fucking joke. It's in the Bible, okay? It's in the Bible. Do you believe in the Bible or don't you? What the hell's wrong with you if you don't believe in the Bible? I guess you're gonna burn in hell. Hey man, I didn't put both those things in the Bible, God did, right? So ask him about it. Anyway, you think I'm mad at that? Let's go to the next story and see what happens. Okay. So we have another local news story here. Now, we don't normally cover that, but I think that it is important. We sometimes cover it in the case of mass shootings, etc., when there is a larger point to be made, and there is, unfortunately, in this case. This is out of Miami. It is about a parking dispute. Unfortunately, a lot of small-time disputes have started in South Florida and mushroomed into national issues. So in this case, we have Robert Fenton. He's one of the neighbors involved. The other one is Robin Cross. She's a producer at WSVN 7 News Miami. She comes home one day and she parks in a place that Fenton doesn't like. And apparently he's taping her because they've had this altercation once or twice before. And she starts yelling at him. Okay, not that interesting. She starts cursing. Not that interesting. But wait till you hear what she says at the end. Let's watch.
You're just blocking my driveway.
You know what? You are fucking blocking the right of way of every car that passes down this road.
You are blocking my driveway.
Of every car that passes down this road.
You cannot block my driveway.
You cannot park in the street either. It's illegal. His car got hit, and the cop told us every car on this fucking street could get fucking ticketed. Yes, I use the word fucking if you haven't heard it before, except for your fucking son who dates a fucking nigger. Said it out loud, finally.
So she puts together the news. She is an investigative segment producer at Channel 7 down in Miami, or she was until this got out. And she worked at a local news radio station. She worked at CBS 4 before, the Sun Sentinel, CBS 12 News in West Palm Beach, and now WSVN, etc. And the list goes on and on and on of all the different places that she has apparently polluted the news with her point of view. But it's not about her. It's about the larger issue, which is apparently these people have been bottling this up, and it's a lot of people. And to this day, it shocks me. Every time I hear it, I can't quite believe it. So she's apparently been wanting to get that off her chest for a long, long time. And you know, is it a coincidence that we have on local news scary pictures of minorities, crime, crime, crime? Well, is it proportionate to the amount of crime that happens within the different races? Different studies have borne out that it is not. But hey, it gets better ratings when you scare the majority of your viewers, which oftentimes are white, with scary pictures of the others. Fill in the blank, and oftentimes, of course, it is minorities and African Americans. And we think, well, maybe that's just what sells, or you have one excuse or another excuse, or sometimes it's just the people doing the news who apparently have those biases, but they never shared them with you until, as she said, finally she said it. I'll get to that quote again one more time if you didn't hear it clearly at the end of that video. But I'm just going to turn back to the Fentons for 1 second. So there was the dad, Robert Fenton, and then there's Avery Fenton, who's a lawyer in Fort Lauderdale and a former public defender in West Palm Beach. So he has been beseeching WSVN to fire her. And he wrote this, he said, "I'm not looking to ruin her life or future employment, but I do think the punishment should be commensurate with what happened. Your employee reduced my girlfriend to nothing other than a slur based off of the color of her skin. last night. I'm simply looking to see your employee terminated, which I believe in the light of the events is fair recourse. Now, look, recourse for the Fentons, I feel bad for them and they had to put up with this nonsense, etc. But to me, okay, that's one thing. To me, the much more important thing is, how many times did she put into news stories that bias, that stereotype, that thing that was lingering in the back of her head, and maybe she didn't even know she was putting into the news stories. Given how vicious she was in that tape, maybe she did. But most of the time, it's subconscious, and you don't realize you're doing it. How many times did that get on air? How many times did it pollute the airwaves and get into people's heads? And look, I often go back to this, but it's really important. There's a brown-eyed, blue-eyed experiment that a teacher in Kansas did. She separated the class into kids with blue eyes and brown eyes and told one set of kids that they were inferior and the other kid that they were superior. So the problem, and it was an amazing experiment. She flipped it, the same thing happened, even though they had just gone through the experiment in the other way. Not only did the people that were told they were superior think that they were superior, the most damaging part and the most heartbreaking part was that the people who were told they were inferior believed it. And they started doing worse in school, and the effect was nearly immediate, and it was significant. So we've been telling these people through the news all along, these biases that the people who created the news had. But they never admitted it, and anytime you brought it up, they'd say, oh, that's just liberals who want to be victims, and it's all not true. Racism in America, never. So I draw your attention to that last quote if you didn't hear it right. She said, I said it out loud, finally. And I know that these are times where people feel emboldened to say those things out loud. In a sense, I'm glad they're out of the closet. But what was never said out loud has been haunting us for time immemorial in America. And now it's being said out loud, and it is super ugly to hear. But at least you know it now. So yes, that particular station has taken some action. She's at least been suspended, and we will see if they take further action on this. But the more important story is what's in the back of all of our heads and how did it get there? And a lot of times it got there through the news, and it got there through folks like this who believed these things and kept it inside, at least in terms of what they said to others, but in their actions, unfortunately, spoke volumes. Okay. Now we go to another story, unfortunately, of not similar to that, but it is also disconcerting on a similar topic. Okay, so it's Black History Month, and the NYPD wanted to celebrate. Well, that's great news. Well, unfortunately, great news oftentimes turns into bad news in America. But 100th Precinct put out a tweet, and I wanted to show it to you guys. So this is, like I said, 100th Precinct in New York City. So that particular precinct of the New York Police Department putting this out. Jack Johnson became the first African-American man to hold a world heavyweight championship boxing title in 1908. He held on to the belt until 1915. Hashtag Black Lives Matter. Okay, I look at that and I say, okay, wonderful, no problem. That sounds like a good way to remember Jack Johnson and other things in Black history and a way to celebrate Black culture. Okay. Others looked at it and thought, how dare they? How dare they what? Well, let's find out. We've got an anonymous police source in New York City raging about it and demanding answers. They say, how can a precinct commander lead people when she aligns herself with a group that is known to hate law enforcement and wishes police officers dead? She's making a political statement on a job website. Let's see what the police commissioner does now. If they don't take action, then I guess the police commissioner and the mayor condone this. So what kind of action do we have to take? We have to fire people for saying that Black lives matter. All right, so let's break this down in a couple of ways. Number one, does Black Lives Matter as a group want police officers dead? Not remotely, they've never said it. No part of any organization has ever said it. There has been one chant that Fox News found and says over and over again, fry him like bacon, which we've given you the context for 1,000 times, but the rest of the media will not report on it. Apparently the protesters were kidding around with the cops who were right there next to them. But it doesn't matter. Okay, you don't believe me? That's fine. Fry him like bacon. Wow, they had one bad chant. Did they ever take any action? And it was one group in one city. No, it's so easy to demonize. What is the heart of Black Lives Matter? What does the overwhelming majority of the Black Lives Matter protesters and organizers want? Something really simple. For Black lives to also matter. They never asked for more privileges. They never said, I don't want you to care about white lives or Asian lives. That would be preposterous. They're for civil rights. They're asking, can Black lives matter also? Do they criticize law enforcement from time to time? Yes. Do they say we shouldn't have any cops? No. What do they say? They say, can the cops also care about us? Oh my God, how dare you? No, the cops should only care about certain people. What is the counter to that? Shouldn't it be obvious? Shouldn't we all open our arms and say, yes, of course Black lives should matter too. And of course that they're part of the community that we're supposed to be serving. If you don't agree with that, what is wrong with you? So apparently just simply saying Black lives should matter is an affront to these cops in New York. An affront, like Black lives should matter? God, and you wonder why they protest you. You're shocked and chagrined to find out that the community does not trust you. When simply saying Black lives matter is something that enrages you so much that you think somebody should be fired over it. So, as Law and Crime reports, the tweet was later deleted and replaced with the same message and the hashtag Black History Month. Now, it turns out it wasn't the head of the precinct, the woman that's pictured in the tweet that sent it out. It was an underling. Who cares? I wish it was her, and I would celebrate her. I don't know if the underling meant to put it Black Lives Matter or meant to put Black History Month. It doesn't matter. Wouldn't it be great if a local police department said, yes, Black lives do matter. They matter to us because they're our community and we're here to protect them and we're here to serve them. Wouldn't that be amazing? That apparently is too much to ask for. So now, look, I'm sure the police commissioner doesn't want any part of this controversy. The mayor doesn't want any part of it. Everybody gets super angry on both sides. The two sides are, should the police be reformed in any way, shape, or form to serve the entire community, or should they not? No, the police are perfect and they shouldn't. You don't touch them. How dare you criticize them? We'll do whatever the hell we want to the community and you'll like it. Those are your two sides apparently. What's the other side? What's the other side? That Black lives shouldn't matter? That they shouldn't ask for civil rights? Police should never be reformed? What's the other side? Are you telling me that you think that the cops, if you're a right winger who hates Black Lives Matter, that cops have never abused anyone? They've never abused African Americans. All the statistics that show you that blacks and whites smoke marijuana at the same rate, but blacks are arrested at 4 times the rate. That's all made up. I know everything is made up. And then one blogger found another statistic that is in contravention of 99% of the other statistics, and maybe climate change doesn't exist, and maybe there's an alternate reality, and maybe the crowd size for Trump was larger than any other crowd that's ever happened, because I live on planet Mars and everything is different there. But the reality is, yes, of course some cops, not all cops, but some cops, unfortunately a lot of cops in different times, in different places have disproportionately targeted African Americans. It's not to say that they should all be fired, they should all be fried like bacon. It doesn't mean any of that. It just says, can we reform the police a little bit? And so when they react so virulently in this way, at least some of the cops that reacted to this tweet in the press, it gives you a sense, not that they need less reform, that perhaps they need more reform. Now, luckily, it looks like they're not gonna do anything to the precinct captain. An NYPD spokesperson said the officials are, quote, currently reviewing the Twitter account of the 100th precinct for all those terrible things that they said about how Black lives might actually matter. The NYPD admitted, however, that nothing was likely to come of that investigation, noting, quote, there is no indication that any discipline will be given out. The fact that this is even a debate is preposterous and depressing. Look, I personally run into a lot of cops who love this show, say great things about us. They're part of our audience. We got family members who are cops and some of the hosts and on the people who work here. But it is also troubling that there is a whole nother set of cops out there who think that the idea of reform to serve everybody in America equally is abhorrent to them. We don't know who's who. There are a lot of good cops out there, and there's a decent amount of bad cops out there. And this kind of reaction is not helpful to the community, and that means everyone in the community, white, black, Asian, it doesn't matter. It is counterproductive and disconcerting. If we can't trust our cops to protect and to serve us as they are supposed to do, are we comfortable giving them badges and guns? I want to be comfortable. I want the cops, wherever it's needed, to be reformed enough so that we know that they're serving the whole community and everyone can have peace of mind about what they're doing and that they're here to actually protect us. It's not too much to ask for. All right, I got to take a break. Now, when we come back, an American hero is born. You're going to love what she did in West Virginia, and you're going to hate the politician's reaction, but it is an amazing story. We'll have that for you when we return.
Corey, did you hear the news? Yeah? You know what we have to do, right? Let's do it.
Somebody, and I wouldn't lose any voters, okay? It's like incredible.
Hey, bud, you still there? Yeah, I had the dream again. Yeah. No, I was in the rain this time. It was pretty cute.
Oh, did you guys help us win a Shorty Award last year?
Did you?
In the category of Audience Honor for Best Overall YouTube Presence?
Best Overall YouTube Presence.
We want to win it again this year.
That's right.
We want to win, and we can't do it without your help.
We need you.
We need you.
All right, so here's how we're gonna do it, guys. Look, we wanna win for best overall YouTube presence for the Young Turks, but we also wanna win best in overall Facebook presence and best web series for The Breakdown, which is great. But let me tell you about YouTube presence. Go to tytnetwork.com/YouTube presence, which is very logical. Click on the vote in best overall YouTube presence, also very logical. You can log in using your Facebook or Twitter accounts to create a Shorty account to submit your vote. You share your vote on social media, ba-bang, that counts as an extra vote. You're voting like crazy now. Now, do this for The Breakdown and web series and in a Facebook presence as well. And you're seeing the links to vote on your screen. And don't worry, we'll have them in the description box below. So easy peasy, you just go right there, just click, boom, you're there. And get a load of this. You can vote once per day all the way to February 22nd.
Every day, every day.
Go nuts, have fun. You know, we always tell you to get out and vote. This gives you an opportunity to do it over and over again. Sorry, you know, by the end, we might just get tired of winning.
No, and this is great practice for the midterm elections. You know, get that voting muscle in order.
That's right, here we go, ready?
Yeah.
Practice.
All right, back on the Young Turks. LL Bishop writes in, I cannot say how much I love to hear Dan Rather's voice. Hangry Skywalker says, Dan Rather's half hour seems to fly by, such a great segment. Thank you guys, but are we gonna get any tweets about me and what am I, chopped liver? No, I'm kidding. I love Dan Rather's show. Everybody check it out. It's every Monday at 5:30 p.m. Eastern. It leads into the Young Turks. Just tune in half an hour earlier. And I love that you guys appreciate it as much as I do. Tom Zawacki says, typical Christian logic, love thy neighbor unless their morals contradict yours. And then Emily Vandermeulen with a quick tweet saying, referring to the Miami news producer Kerfuffle, I hope he got her car towed. And if she's parking in front of his driveway, that should be a fairly easy thing to do. Here on that. All right, now let's go to our American hero. Okay. So I don't know what's in the water in West Virginia lately, and that might be part of the issue here. But all of a sudden, we've got a lot of progressive heroes coming out of West Virginia, and they are actually, like I said, literally fighting for the water, including Paula Jean Swearengin running for Senate against Joe Manchin, and we've had a lot of them on Rebel headquarters. But this one, wow, what a wonderful action and statement by Lissa Lucas. She went down to talk about a law that they were trying to pass down in West Virginia. And I think you're gonna love what she had to say. The law is about how you needed 100% of the landowners to give permission to use their land for oil and gas companies. Now that makes sense, it's their land. I mean, that should cut across all ideologies. I know conservatives don't like easement laws when you've got a mall coming through or whatever and they take your land for public use, and that was a huge conservative issue. Now they want to knock it down to just 75% have to agree. Why? Because the oil and gas companies pay the politicians. So we're done with that. There goes your constitutional rights. And whether you're conservative or progressive is irrelevant to them. But it's relevant to her, so she went down there to set them straight. Listen to what she had to say, and then listen to what they did to her.
I'd also like to point out that the people who are going to be speaking in favor of this bill are all going to be paid by the industry, and the people who are going to be voting on this bill are also often paid by the industry. For example, and I have to keep it short simply because the public.
Oh, not the day to have problems with the video. I love that video. That's an American hero. Can we try again?
And I have to keep it short simply because the public only gets a minute 45 while lobbyists can throw a gala at the Marriott with whiskey and wine and talk for hours to the delegates. So to keep it short, on the Judiciary Committee, Charlotte Lane about $10,000 from gas and oil interests, including AEP, Marathon, First Energy, Dominion, EQT, and I could go on. Next, let's talk about John Schott from Mercer. First Energy, $2,000, Appalachian Power, $2,000, Steptoe & Johnson, that's a gas and oil law firm, $2,000, Consol Energy, $1,000, EQT, $1,000, and I could go on. Now let's talk about Jason Harshbarger.
Ms. Lucas, we ask no personal comments be made. If you want to talk about
personal comments.
It is a personal comment, and I'm going to call you out of order if you're talking about individuals on the committee. So if you would just address the bill. If not, I'll ask you to please step down.
Jason Harshbarger took $3,500, about 40% of his money comes.
Oh my God. Man, she's an American hero. If you can, man, every one of you go do likewise. So that happened to be the West Virginia House of Delegates. That was on Friday. All she did was she just read the donations from the fossil fuel companies. You're passing a law to the benefit of fossil fuel companies, and that is going to take away constitutional rights of American citizens. So I'm just going to read the donations you got from fossil fuel companies. That's all. I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just reading the donations. Apparently, the politicians took such great offense at that, they had to cut her mic and remove her from the building and to shove her out of the way. Why are you taking offense? I thought it was just those fossil fuel companies who are people, because corporations are people, my friend. That's what Mitt Romney tells me. That's what the corrupt politicians tell me. That they were just speaking to you. That money is speech, and those are people. So why are you embarrassed? You were just having a conversation with those oil companies. Why are you so embarrassed? Because you know that it's in fact corruption. And what those are bribes. They're legalized bribes. That's the swamp. So when all she does is read the money that you have taken, you want her to leave the building. That's her house. That's not your house. That's her house. She's a citizen of West Virginia, doing what every citizen should do, get involved, call him out on it. So I want to quote her more afterwards. She said, as I tried to give my remarks at the public hearing this morning on HB 4268 in defense of our constitutional property rights, I got dragged out of House chambers, and allowed me to point out that if delegates genuinely think that my talking about who their campaign donors are and how much they're receiving from corporate lobbyists / corporate PACs is an ad hominem attack, then they should be refusing those donations. If you don't like your bribes being called out, then don't take them. That makes all the sense in the world. Otherwise, why aren't you proud? You should be like, yeah, of course. I had a great conversation with an oil company. At the end of that conversation, they gave me $5,000. And I used it to get elected over and over again and to maintain my own power, privilege, and money. You go ahead and be proud. If you're not proud, then maybe you might want to fix the system. She went on to say, refuse any donation that if someone mentions it makes you feel personally attacked. Because that's not an attack, that's guilt. And you should be feeling that. Let that guilt about who you're really working for inform your votes. Don't let the corporate money do it. So she's going to be on Rebel headquarters tonight. We have wonderful producers here at the Young Turks. She was going to be on before I even knew the story happened. And she's going to come and tell her side of it. You know the Young Turks is live 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern, Rebel headquarters, where we have progressives come on and talk about their issues. Now in this case, it cuts across all party lines, but she is a Democrat. Apparently she's going to run for office, which is more power to her. That's fantastic. Rebel headquarters is right after the Young Turks live at 8:05 p.m. Eastern, tytnetwork.com/live. If you miss any of the interviews with any of the candidates, go to youtube.com/tytpolitics, and we'll have those links down below. Check it out. I'm going to give you Lissa's website as well, and we're going to do it at Rebel headquarters as well. But I want you to read a couple. I want to read a couple more quotes to you guys from her as to why she's running, because she's an average citizen. She's not a born politician. She's not a lobbyist. Not any of that. Okay. She says, "I'm a regular person, just a regular person who got so disgusted with money in politics that despite being an introvert, I'm running for office." Yes. Look. There's so many people working on these issues from so many different angles, and they fight so hard, and they're regular people. Stay in there, okay? Stay in the fight. And I've seen other people say, look, I never wanted to do it. I have issues stuttering. I have issues being an introvert. I don't like to go out into crowds, etc. But they do it. They brave that to be able to speak their mind. That there's nothing better as an American citizen than doing that. Speak out. You're supposed to. That's the heart of the country. She said, "I'm a Democrat, but I know this district is being politically sacrificed by Democratic leadership in order to get energy sector money in their up-ticket races. I've called, I've written, I've begged in person. Running for office is the only other thing I can think of to fight back." She said, "There must be regular folks to represent us, people who aren't interested in making politics a lifelong career. I want to get the money out of politics. That'll make a huge difference. Politicians will then have to listen to their voters, their real constituents. Then hopefully I can get back to the farm and go about fixing my camper and hiking with my dog." You know what that reminds me of? It reminds me of the founding fathers. That's what they used to say all the time. We just want to fix this thing and then get back to our farms. True today in West Virginia as it was back then. And unfortunately, the fight for democracy is true and important and relevant today as it was back then, because we have lost our democracy. Now we have legalized bribery. You're just allowed to give campaign contributions. You're allowed to do independent expenditures. You're allowed to do dark money, and you're allowed to do it at unlimited amounts. Of course they work for their donors. 93% of Americans say that politicians work for their donors and not their voters. We are not blind, deaf, and dumb. We can see it as clear as day. You can shut all the mics you like, and it isn't going to fix the problem, and it isn't going to cover up what you're doing. There's only one answer: get money out of politics. And if you do, and you have real democracy, then the Democratic leadership and the Republican leadership can't continue to work for the corporations and not for us. And by the way, also for the unions. I don't want any money in politics. I don't care where it comes from. And the private financing so that they don't work for private interests. Lisa Lucas is an American hero. I love what she did. Learn from her. Go do it wherever you live, and make sure you hold your politicians accountable. Fight back. Get money out of politics. I am energized today. So God bless her heart, man. So we'll talk to her in just a little over an hour. Don't miss that interview. I can't wait to speak to her tonight at 8:05 p.m. Eastern, right here. Okay. So now let me go to the opposite end of the spectrum and talk about that Democratic leadership that, I forgot to give you her website. I knew I was pausing for a reason. Let me just give it to you real quick, and we'll do it again at Rebel headquarters. It's lisalucas.com. Go check it out. I love the Oracle part. I love the holler from the holler. Jesus Christ, man. It's just so great. So LISSA Lucas.com. Go check it out right now. Okay. So now let's go do that story. Okay. So Huffington Post has a really interesting story about how Democrats are trying to take back seats in across the country in the different state races. Now, they've had a lot of success doing that lately, but it has been unexpected candidates, not the ones that have gotten the most financial backing, but the ones that have gotten the most grassroots support. Has the Democratic Party learned anything from that? Unfortunately, most of you know how this story is going to end. No, not remotely. So Itai Vardy at HuffPost with an excellent article, so I'm going to quote it at length. Begins this way. When Democratic legislators gathered in a hotel in Portland, Maine for a 2-day policy conference last August, they were joined by a host of corporate interests who have good reason to want in on those conversations. Indeed, those interests do not necessarily align with the citizens. The meeting of the Democratic Legislative Campaign Committee, the party arm responsible for supporting state legislative candidates, was closed to the press and billed as an off-the-record event. So let's be clear about this. Democratic legislators get together. It is closed to the press. It is closed to the public. That means you are not allowed to see it, but it is open for business. So let's get into those details. The Finance Council includes companies, trade groups, labor unions, and public interest organizations who pay anywhere from $12,000 to more than $100,000 to the DLCC. In return, the conference provided an opportunity for donors to interact with state legislators, many of whom head their respective chambers from around the country. And yes, unfortunately, the leadership makes the most important decisions at the state houses, assemblies, and senates all across the country. And they are the ones who are invited to meet with their corporate and union sponsors and donors. As long as you've got enough cash to play, you will get your say. The Portland conference included prominent representation from the pharmaceutical and health insurance industries, including lobbyists from America's Health Insurance Plans, a national trade group that is currently lobbying against Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All bill, representatives from the Association for Accessible Medicines, Eli Lilly, Sanofi, Sanovian Pharmaceuticals, Anthem, Merck, Novartis, and Vertex all also attended. So, you're not invited, but the pharmaceutical companies are invited. And then when you try for single payer in different states, all of a sudden it's blocked. You don't know why it's blocked. You have a sneaking suspicion. Those folks contribute a lot of money to those politicians. And you give a lot of money to politicians, and then you get to have nice cushy meetings with them in Portland, Maine, where you can talk their ear off for hours and hours and tell them how important it is to not have single payer, to not have Medicare for all, to make sure that those private pharmaceutical companies and healthcare and insurance companies continue to make overwhelming profits, how important it is for business and for the quote unquote economy, but not necessarily for the citizens. Representatives from the Edison Electric Institute, the powerful national trade group advancing utilities interests, were also present, as were the American Fuel and Petrochemical Manufacturers, the Nuclear Energy Institute, McDonald's, Coca-Cola, Comcast, Monsanto, eBay, and Wells Fargo. You don't have to hate those companies. I like a Big Mac. I've been known to have a Coke time or two. I probably have unfortunately consumed something Monsanto has made, but that isn't the point. The point is, should corporations be able to have an audience that is paid for with your state legislators? Do you get the same kind of access? I know the answer. The answer is hell no. And I tell you this, at the state level, it's actually way better than the national level. Sometimes you actually can talk to your state legislators. But is it fair that these companies get to pay all this money and get special access? And do you think that the special access does not eventually wind up influencing the politicians? Does anybody really believe that anymore? I know on cable news they say, oh, they are all honorable gentlemen and ladies from these states, and they have different ideas and ideology and philosophy. But the overwhelming majority of Americans know that in reality, the number one philosophy is who's writing my checks. And if it's a union, maybe I'll represent the union. If it's a corporation, I will definitely represent the corporation. Where are citizens in that equation? Like I explained, there were also unions, and here's HuffPost on that. Major labor unions also attended, including the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades, Iron Workers International, and International Brotherhood of Teamsters, as well as representatives from Americans for Responsible Solutions, which advocates for gun control. Now, I like gun control. I like unions, generally speaking. And I used to belong to a union, and I think unions help to do collective bargaining. Do I want to hurt unions? No. Do I want to take away power from the unions? No. But do I want unions to be able to give cold hard cash to politicians and hope that that doesn't unduly influence them? No, 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 no. I don't want unions doing it. I don't want corporations doing it. And by the way, unions, I got news for you. There's a hell of a lot more corporations than unions, and they have a hell of a lot more money. You are going to be on the perpetual losing end of that equation. I don't know when it's ever going to get through to you. Get money out of politics, all money. DLCC Communications Director Mara Sloan said the policy conferences are forums for legislators to engage with each other and share new ideas, as well as an opportunity for legislators to interact with industry leaders and learn more about policy positions of both the legislators and the organizations. Now, of course, they're going to frame it that way, and I'm giving you their perspective. There's their quote on it. Oh, we're just trying to learn. I didn't know what the position of the oil companies and the pharmaceutical companies were. Now that they've paid hundreds of thousands of dollars, now I know their positions. This is all about education. Does anyone really believe that? Get all the money out. wolf-pac.com to get the money out. Do it right now. And if you want uncorrupted Democrats, well, then choose ones that don't take corporate PAC money. That's justicedemocrats.com. Okay, the Finance Council members who paid $35,000 or more to the DLCC were granted the opportunity for one-on-one meetings with state legislators slated for 90 minutes during the second day of the conference, according to the agenda. Well, they get one-on-one meetings. You get usually nothing. One state legislator who asked not to be named because he's received assistance from the DLCC said he felt, quote, uncomfortable about the abundance of corporate interests. Now, they have one particular example of a former United States Senator, Mark Begich, and I think that it is instructive, so I wanted to quote that as well. The DLCC conference also featured former Democratic Alaska Senator Mark Begich, who joined the legal and lobbying firm Brownstein, Fayed, Farber, and Schreck as a strategic advisor after leaving Congress in 2015. Begich has backed Alaska's oil and gas industry. Mining practice includes, in his 6 years in the Senate, and co-founded the New Deal, a centrist Democratic group initially described as supporting pro-business progressives that now defines itself with the more neutral pro-growth progressives tag. Brownstein, Fayed, Farber, and Schreck's robust energy and mining practice includes such clients as Freeport LNG, Citgo Petroleum, Cobalt International Energy, and Colorado Oil and Gas Association. Begich also runs his own Anchorage-based consulting shop, Northern Compass Group, and in late 2016 called for opening the Arctic to offshore drilling. Look at that, a Democrat who worked for the oil and gas industry basically when he was a senator, then goes through the revolving door, goes and becomes a lobbyist for them, and then goes and talks to the current legislators and tells them, oh yeah, oil and gas is awesome. And then shovels money in their direction as money was shoveled in his direction. And then all of a sudden you've got offshore drilling in the Arctic just like they wanted. Now in this case, it was Republicans had enough votes and Trump could do it all on his own. But oftentimes when they need Democratic votes, just enough Democratic votes appear to make all those positions possible. And then what do they tell you? Oh, there was nothing we could do. What could we do? Oh, well, golly gee, we had to do what the Republicans wanted. Oh, are they also our donors? What a fun coincidence. It's gross, the whole system is gross. It is bound to corrupt both parties if you set up a system that rewards unlimited legalized bribery. wolf-pac.com, if you don't get the money out, you're gonna be stuck with this forever. Two political parties deeply poisoned. One more quote here from Mara Sloan, who's the communications from the DLCC, says, no, the DLCC does not take policy positions and there is no quid pro quo expected from anyone attending our conferences. We are working every day to close the fundraising gap with the Republicans who regularly outraise us. In other words, what do you want us to do? The Republicans are even more corrupt than us, and they say that they do exactly what the corporations want them to do. Whereas we kind of mainly do what the corporations want us to do. Hey, we don't spell it out, there's no quid pro quo. What do you think they're paying all that money for? And they give you all that money the first time. Why did they give it the second time? Because they got a return on investment. These are not nonprofits. They're all in the business of maximizing profit. If they give you money the second time, that means you help them maximize profit to their advantage and not to our advantage. The guy who clearly outlined this Democratic conundrum, as so he thinks it is, was Barney Frank. He talked to TYT Politics during the 2016 campaign. This short little clip gives you exactly what is wrong with the Democratic Party, and they don't even realize it. Watch.
Do you think it would really be better for liberals, regulators, if all the money from the banks went to Republicans as opposed to just 80%? Because we could accomplish that. We could refuse to accept any.
Yes, yes, that's what I want. Not because I'm impractical, but because if you take 20% of the banker money, that means you will lose forever. You signed on to a system where you have a permanent, massive disadvantage. Isn't the smarter idea to say, I am uncorrupted and I will fix this system? Because if you maintain the system, yes, Barney Frank, you might have a lot of power and privilege and money. Congratulations to you. And Mark Begich could be a lobbyist forever and make tons of money drilling in the Arctic and enabling all of the corporate priorities. But the Democrats will be forever consigned to the minority party, not because they are the minority in the country, not because the Americans don't agree with our positions. Almost every policy position Americans are progressive on. I could show you poll after poll. It is not my opinion, it is facts based on polling. So why do Democrats lose? Because they are paid to lose. They are part of a corrupt system where their job is to lose. So the DLCC and Barney Frank go around and go, what do you want us to do, not take any money? I mean, our job is to be a little less corrupt than the Democrats and to get our ass just kicked one election after another. And that is why at the state level, Democrats have lost 1,000 seats. Think about the severity of the problem. 1,000 seats they lost. And worse yet, even when they're in charge, they somehow magically wind up losing on policy positions. They lost at the national level, the House, the Senate, the Supreme Court, and the presidency to a guy like Donald Trump. Does that seem like it's working as a Democratic strategy? Wolf-pac.com, get all the money out, save the Democratic and Republican parties, by the way. If you're a conservative, why do you want Republicans to be deeply corrupt and in the pocket of big business? I got news for you, big business doesn't give a damn about you. It cares about its bottom line, and you all know that. And they keep telling you, don't worry, it'll trickle down to you. Does it look like it's trickling down? And finally, if you're a Democrat, go for the uncorrupted Democrats. Justice Democrats take no corporate PAC money. Look at their agenda. You agree with some parts, disagree with any other parts. Okay, you make your own decisions. But at least you know they're not working for these guys. Whereas unfortunately, so much of the others, especially at the national level, and unfortunately in the leadership levels at the states, they're working for somebody, but it ain't you. We'll be right back.
They'd rather lose to Republicans than have a progressive win with them. That's how dumb the corporate Democrats are.
It's the Democrats who lull you to sleep, and at the end of the day, they're the ones who push the right-wing agenda.
This is why you lost to Trump, you fucking moron. What the fuck is wrong with you? Whoever wrote that, I'm sure they were typing with one hand and going like this with you. The Democrats are dead. The way you feel right now, that's how a chump feels. Do not freak out.
Do you trust the establishment media?
The United States economy has never been better. Monetary policy is spectacular.
Everybody thought Jamie Dimon was the king of Wall Street last week. Well, it might be Ken Lewis now. He takes the crown. The best sales force out there is Merrill Lynch, and now it goes to BofA. It's pretty amazing.
Pretty amazing. Buying opportunity. I do think this is a buying opportunity. We're going to see a stabilization and just a tremendous snapback.
The rally will be jaw-dropping.
The Occupy Wall Street movement is not a spontaneous protest against economic inequality.
This is what we mean by the establishment press.
It is a well-thought-out campaign.
To bring down the infrastructure of this country.
The
embarrassment is that I'm given credibility in this world because of the disappointment that the public has in what the news media does.
I'm the former chairman of the Veterans Committee, and I've learned a little bit about the cost of war. What the president is trying to do, and I agree with him, is to do everything that we can without going to war.
So what do you say to your critics? I'm talking about Democratic critics who say, you know what, he's really just a socialist pacifist.
I very rarely read in any coverage of Bernie that he's a socialist.
Bernie Sanders is a socialist, for God's sake.
Most analysts are saying that Hillary Clinton's going to win in a landslide.
I continue to believe Mr. Trump will not be president.
I've got Trump at 279, 259.
Wait a minute. No.
I know you don't believe that. Sorry,
We're not going to be polite anymore. You know what we're going to do? We're going to fight back. Fight for a free and independent media. We're done with politeness. We fight back. We are going to put together the best investigative reporting team in the country. TYT will give you the four horsemen, and we will let them gallop. Help unleash real journalism in the country. We don't need anybody else anymore but you guys. TYTnetwork.com/go. This is going to be amazing.
All right, back on the Young Turks. Yeah, you guys, I have one more story and then we got a whole second hour for you guys, but really good tweets here that I want to address as quickly as I can. I Am Sox writes, and good thing that the Republican-controlled Congress in Michigan passed truly unlimited dark money and donations last year. Yeah, and of course being sarcastic there, and that is a terrible thing. Now let me move on to some things that I want to straighten out. Proud Lumberjack writes, and if you take money out of politics, elected officials will still be influenced with material goods and promise of financial gain after leaving office. Corruption is just a fact of life. No. Look, you're both right and absolutely wrong about that. So will they try to influence them in other ways? Of course they will, right? But we before 1976, 1978, two Supreme Court decisions in America, you were not allowed to give unlimited money to politicians. Was there still corruption? Yes, but you had to actually take a risk. And if you got caught, you would be sent to jail. And we had a lot less corruption in America. And at the time, progressives were so strong that Richard Nixon passed the EPA to appease Ralph Nader. That's how strong progressives were, because they were actually had to listen to their voters and not just their donors. So no system is perfect, but don't let that drive you to pessimism. We can make this system much, much better. wolf-pack.com/join. Okay, Mr. Squirrel asks or writes, new thought, are corporations citizens? If they're not legally citizens, could we challenge their right to speak through money on a judicial level? That's exactly the decisions that I'm talking about in 76 and 78. Supreme Court said Corporations are people, my friend, and they had said that earlier. That's a whole nother thing. Tom Hartman has great speeches about that. It's a bullshit, but that went into the record. Anyway, in 76 and 78, they said, since corporations are citizens, they have the right to speak, and I will now declare money as speech, so corporations can give unlimited money to politicians. Oh, disaster. By the time Citizens United happened, they were shooting a dead horse. So, are corporations actually citizens? Hell no, hell no. That doesn't mean you should kill off corporations. Doesn't mean companies shouldn't exist. Young Turks is a company. But we should have legal rights, not constitutional rights. There are no natural rights for corporations. They're legal fictions that we created. They're runaway robots. We can give them any rights that we think are correct. The idea that they have natural rights is preposterous, and it is not against just progressive idea. It should be against conservative ideology as well. Okay, I'm gonna read you one more because it's really important. Sarah said, I can call, write, and show up to talk to my House representative at the federal level, although his ideas are diametrically opposed to mine. He doesn't give a shit because I don't write big checks. I'm disabled and care about healthcare and attacks on my doctor's prescriptions. Okay, then do as Lisa Lucas did. Whenever they have a hearing, go and just start reading. It's in Open Secrets. So you go to Open Secrets online, you'll see who their donors are. Just start reading their donor names. If everyone listening in just this audience went and at every public hearing and at every town hall start reading the donor names of all the different politicians, you'd be shocked at what a difference that would make. It send a chill down their spines. That's why when I had Wolfpack, I say they're not coming for us, we're coming for them. There's a lot of different ways to do that. That's one simple way. It doesn't mean you're gonna get change overnight, but we keep on pounding it, we will get change. All right, you gotta believe, and that's how we've always won. Okay, all right, and here, this is a case where we have over 90% of Americans on our side. This is the only thing Republicans and Democrats agree on. All right, I gotta give you the budget story. Okay, so let's go over here. For those of you listening on the radio or anywhere else, we're just changing camera shots when I say, let's go over here, okay? I'm not actually moving. Okay, I felt the need to clarify that after about a year. Okay, Donald Trump's budget is out. Can you guess whether it's a disaster? Well, it's a disaster if you're a progressive based on its priorities, but it's also a disaster if you're a conservative based on what you claimed you cared about for all these years. So let me tell you all about that. New York Times reporting, President Trump on Monday sent Congress a $4.4 trillion budget with steep cuts in domestic programs and entitlements, including Medicare. That's really important, we'll get back to that. And large increases for the military, envisioning deficits totaling at least $7.1 trillion over the next decade. Now, wait a minute, conservatives. I thought you hated deficits. He's got $7 trillion worth of deficits for you guys. What do you say now? I'm listening. Right, probably nothing at all. New York Times continues, the budget proposal would add $984 billion to the federal deficit next year and would continue adding $7 trillion to the federal deficit over the next 10 years. So I'm gonna show you a graph here of what the deficits looked like under Obama and Clinton. So, I'm sorry, under Obama and Trump. So under Obama, when Obama came into office, in the graph you can see Trump handed him a giant, Bush handed him a giant deficit. He starts bringing it down. So you see Republicans create giant deficits, Democrats bring them down. And under Trump, what's gonna happen? They're gonna bring them right back up. Because what do Republicans do? They never balance the budget. All they do is pile up debt. Why? Because they want to spend, especially on the military and defense contractors and their donors, and they want to do crony capitalism, but they also want tax cuts for the rich. So that's why deficits always go up under Republicans. Reagan did it, Bush did it, and now Trump is doing it again. So don't, if you're Republicans, please, please stop pretending you care about deficits, because you most certainly do not and never have. Okay, that bill, which President Trump signed into law last week, now referring to, let me actually pause here and explain this a little bit better. So this is Trump's budget proposal, and now the House and Senate are gonna look at it, they're gonna change it up, and they're gonna have a final product. Now we just had an extension of the budget that had a certain agreement between Democrats and Republicans. So is Trump going to listen to it? I mean, he signed it. Is he going to listen to it? According to this budget proposal, no. He's just going to take the Republican side and tell the Democrats to piss off. So that brings us to this piece of news. That bill, the one that they just had, which President Trump signed into law last week, would increase military spending by $195 billion over the next 2 years and increase non-defense spending by $131 billion over that period. But Mr. Trump's budget proposal calls for a different approach and says Congress should not spend that non-defense money. Democrats, you thought you had a deal? No deal. No. Now, he can't unilaterally change it, but this is his proposal and what he's going to fight for, to just totally throw away the deal you guys just did. The White House is proposing $540 billion in non-defense spending for 2019, $57 billion below the new spending cap set by Congress. So if you're going to give money to Lockheed Martin and Boeing and all the defense contractors who finance Republican and oftentimes Democratic politicians, yes, they've got plenty of money for that. Non-defense spending that helps you, the average American citizen, nope. Trump can't find any money for it. He found trillions of dollars for the rich. He's finding trillions of dollars in other spending as long as they're donors. But when it comes to you guys, all of a sudden, oh man, I'm out of change. What could I do? So now there's one thing that he proposed that initially we thought we liked. And if you're progressive, I don't care who it is. If you got a good proposal, we're all ears, right? Infrastructure spending. So what happens for that in this budget? This budget calls for $200 billion over the next decade in new spending to improve the nation's crumbling infrastructure. Well, that sounds good, but as we've told you before, the rest of the money, over $1 trillion, comes from private financing, which then privatizes your roads and bridges. So you have to pay them money the rest of your life when you drive on the same roads and the same bridges you've been driving on. And more at their leisure, they can increase it. Now the $200 billion, that's gone. That's out of your taxpayer money. And on top of that, you have to pay for the roads and the bridges the rest of your life. Okay, is there anything good in this plan? Let's find out. Mr. Trump's plan includes a request for $85.5 billion in discretionary funding for veterans' medical care. Okay, thank God. Yes, that's good. And $13 billion in new spending to tackle opioid abuse through prevention, treatment, and recovery support services, as well as mental health programs. Great. So those are two positive things in the program, and I'll take it. Now, Trump is slashing other parts of the budget that affects the opioid epidemic, but he's putting money in there. Great. I don't care who it is. You got good policies, we'll back them. Now, the rest is a disaster. So when it comes to the EPA, both for climate change and pollution of your local rivers, your waters, and your air, here we go. Mr. Trump's second federal spending also proposes steep cuts for the Environmental Protection Agency, despite Congress's rejection of a similar plan last year to dramatically shrink the agency's budget. The fiscal 2019 budget blueprint would pare the EPA by $28 billion, or 34% from its current level, while eliminating virtually all climate change related programs. So there goes the EPA. Now, finally, how about Medicare? We talked about Medicare. Now look, to be fair to Trump, he's been very clear on this. As CNBC points out, when he ran for office, Trump told voters that he would not cut Medicare or Medicaid. Now, he's already tried to cut Medicaid over and over as he tried to dismantle the Affordable Care Act. But on Medicare, he was crystal clear. So let's actually watch him on the campaign trail here.
Save Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security without cuts. Have to do it. Get rid of the fraud, get rid of the waste and abuse, but save it. People have been paying in for years, and now many of these candidates want to cut it. You save it. So you've been paying into Social Security and Medicare, by the way. Let's put them in the thing, because Medicare does work. With both, you have tremendous waste, fraud, and abuse. We're going to take care of that, okay? But we're not going to cut your Social Security, and we're not cutting your Medicare.
We're not cutting your Medicare. So, CNBC reporting, the Trump budget calls for $237 billion in cuts to Medicare, the huge federally run program that provides health coverage to primarily older Americans. Once again, he lied. Now, I told you during the campaign, he actually had rhetoric that was in a lot of ways progressive and populist. He also had terribly right-wing rhetoric. But from time to time, he would say, hey, the bankers are screwing you. The politicians are corrupt. They keep taking money. I gave them money and I corrupted them. That was all true. He said that, hey, you paid into Medicare and Social Security. Same thing I've been saying on the show for decades. You paid into it. You know why it's called an entitlement? Because you're entitled to it. It's your money. And he said he wouldn't cut it. And he said he'd drain the swamp. See, that's where the lies came in. He didn't drain the swamp. He now revels in the corruption. The banks, they're half his cabinet. He's got 5 Goldman Sachs guys in the top echelon of his cabinet and his administration. Everything he said he'd do, he's doing the opposite. And now, another blow to anyone who ever believed in him. He lied to you. He's going to cut Medicare. Why? He already gave a giant tax cut for the rich. Paul Ryan brags you might get an extra $1.50 a week if you're an average American citizen. That in the top 1% on average, they're getting over $50,000 in tax breaks. On average, each one of them. Are you getting $50,000? No, they're getting it. And it gets worse. In 2027, your tax cuts are taken away, but the tax cuts for corporations and the rich remain. At that point, 83% of the tax cuts goes to the top 1%. Snake oil salesman. He lied to you through and through. He gave the tax cuts to the rich. Now he's going to have to get the money somewhere. Partly he's running up a giant deficit, and the other part is now he's coming for your Medicare. Unfortunately, we warned you. We were afraid this is exactly what he was going to do, and here he is doing it. All right, I got to take a break. We got a lot of other great stories coming up for you guys, including Donald Trump defending a person who's been very credibly accused of abusing his wives and his girlfriends. Well, one of those wives strikes back. Really interesting article she wrote with one thing that I really want you to take away from it. Very important, not just in politics, but in all of life. We'll do that when we come back. right, back on the Young Turks, Cenk and Anna with you. Not that, Don says, funny how massive donations are all right, but healthcare isn't. Excellent point. And Crayfish Caddy says, maybe the DNC should make their new slogan, bend over and take it. That's his opinion. Member shout outs are James Olson and Amanda Horton. Thank you guys. And if you are a member, you can catch our Sweet 16 party here in LA. It is going to be at 8 o'clock Pacific, 11 Eastern. So we'll be doing the regular show here. Then we're going to go to the theater in LA. We'll do the meet and greet for the VIP folks who bought those tickets early, and then we'll start the show. But you guys can catch the whole show if you're a member. So go to tytnetwork.com/sweet16. That's sweet16, and it's $10, just like buying a ticket was $10.
Right.
And watch it at home wherever you are in the world.
Real quick, there's obviously production that goes into the show that we're going to do for our anniversary party. And I've been going through some of our older clips. I have to give you props because there have been multiple examples where you and I are debating on the show and I get loud and angry and aggressive and you handle it. So I just got to give you, anyway, it's going to be a good show. You're not going to want to miss it.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say we were debating the show, and I now realize you were right about everything.
Oh no, that's definitely not the case. That has not happened yet. But yeah, I mean, I think most people would not appreciate my tone when we debate.
Yeah. So. I'm told from time to time that people disagree with me on this network, but everybody's still here.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, what's next?
All right. Following Donald Trump's defense of Rob Porter, who of course resigned because of the fact that 2 of his ex-wives came forward with abuse allegations, Jenny Willoughby, who was his second ex-wife, wanted to respond to the way Trump has handled this situation. Now, first, Trump made it seem as though the real victim here was Rob Porter, even though the abuse allegations came from his ex-wives. By the way, and those allegations included a photo of his first ex-wife with a black eye. But Trump also tweeted the following over the weekend. He said, people's lives are being shattered and destroyed by a mere allegation. Some are true and some are false. Some are old and some are new. There is no recovery for someone falsely accused. Life and career are gone. Is there no such thing any longer as due process? Okay, so I'm amused by the fact that he considers himself the arbiter of some are true, some are false. So which allegations are true and which are false? He just pulls it out of his ass. Anyway, Willoughby wrote an op-ed.
That's not quite fair, and I got to jump in.
Sure.
Because and there is one part of her article that I don't, her statements that I don't agree with that I want to tell you, and one that I really agree with. But no, Donald Trump has always had a very clear standard for what is true and what is not true. If it's to his benefit and his friends' benefit and his allies' benefit, then it is not true, okay, any allegation. If it is to the detriment of the Democrats, then it's definitely true. Al Franken, true. John Conyers, true. Roy Moore, not true. Donald Trump's accusations, not true.
Right.
Steve Wynn, not true. Rob Porter, not true. He's always been consistent.
He also has the same pattern of commentary on any type of controversial issue, like what happened in Charlottesville. When it comes to those white supremacists, some are good people, some, there are good people on both sides. When it comes to this, some allegations are true, some allegations are not true. When it comes to Mexican immigrants, some of them are criminals and rapists, and I'm sure some of them are good people. Like he just decides to play both sides, when in reality, we know where he falls on all of these issues. Okay, so let's go to Jenny Willoughby's statement. Now, she wrote an op-ed for Time magazine and she said the following: the words mere allegation and falsely accused meant to imply that I am a liar, that Kobe Holderness is a liar, that was his first wife, that the work Rob was doing in the White House was of higher value than our mental, emotional, or physical well-being, that his professional contributions are worth more than the truth, that abuse is something to be questioned and doubted. Yep, that's right. That's absolutely right. you get the gist of where Trump is coming from. She continues to write, everyone wants to talk about how Trump implied I am not to be believed, as if Trump is the model of kindness and forgiveness, as if he readily acknowledges his own shortcomings and shows empathy and concern for others.
So look, let me say a couple of things about that I don't perfectly agree with her. So first of all, she says she was floored that Trump had this reaction. Come on. Okay, of course Trump had this reaction, and later she acknowledges in the quote that Anna just read you, are we really surprised that Trump would have this reaction given that he's been accused by, I've lost track, either 16 or 19 or 20 different women in crimes ranging and allegations ranging from exactly what Rob Porter did to sometimes worse. So, okay, that's minor. So, look, saying this, that something is an allegation, does that mean that he's calling you a liar? That's where I'm going to say not necessarily. So look, Trump is the absolute worst example because he has been charged with doing this stuff on his own. He's defended the worst kind of people, including Roy Moore, who've done the most egregious things imaginable. And in his case, he probably does mean to call you a liar. Okay, but just because someone says something is an allegation doesn't mean that's it, I don't believe you, I don't believe anything. And it depends on the context. So for example, Trump talks about due process. Well, in a court of law, we do have due process. That doesn't mean that we don't believe any of the victims. It means we have a certain procedure, a liberal procedure for how to conduct our justice and decide who should go to prison and not. Now that's different than the court of public opinion, right? Nobody goes to prison if I think or Anna thinks that they did something wrong or you think that they did something wrong. Now it could affect their job, et cetera, but that again, there's a process within each company for that, et cetera. So let's just be clear about what we're talking about. Now the next thing that she said, I loved, and I really want everybody to focus on that.
So we're gonna get to that in just a second because I want to respond to what you just said. My sense of her writing is about the context under which Trump made these statements, right? I think she's taking the full context of his statements and responding to that. Because knowing Trump and knowing the way that he has responded to these similar allegations, not only the similar allegations that he's dealt with himself, but the allegations that Roy Moore dealt with, gives everyone an idea as to how seriously Trump takes these allegations. And by the way, the first line in his tweet was, people's lives are being shattered and destroyed by a mere allegation. No, there wasn't a mere allegation. It wasn't as if one individual came forward and said, Rob Portman slapped me across the face once. No. There are two women, his ex-wives who came forward, one with actual photo evidence of the abuse that she suffered while she was with him or while they were with him. So I think, her piece is more about, the context in which, this situation has played out. I think if it was anyone else who said, hey, in a criminal case, this person is innocent until proven guilty, that's different. And by the way, for the love of God, due process, again, Cenk, you mentioned it, but I really want to emphasize it, has to do with criminal cases. Rob Porter, of course, is entitled to due process if he's facing any criminal charges. But in this case, he's not facing criminal charges. In this case, he's dealing with accusations, which, by the way, any other employer would take seriously and would probably consider firing their employee over.
And they knew about the allegations, but did not fire him until it was made public.
Right.
So, and look, let me double down on what you're saying, because if she's just saying it in regards to Trump, it's very hard to dispute because, as you said, there's actually 3 accusations. And if you don't know, the black eye picture, Rob Porter's explanation of that was she somehow got hit with a vase. It's like literally the worst excuse I've ever heard.
Well, vases, sometimes will jump out at you.
Somehow,
in the face,
somehow, right? And in Trump's case, he has over and over again defended people with incredibly credible allegations, overwhelmingly credible allegations against them, and obviously for his own political interest. Okay, now let's get to the part that I love, the next quote.
All right, rather than embarrass an abuser, society is subconsciously trained to question a victim of abuse. I would call it an ignorant denial based on the residual Puritan collective agreement that abuse is uncomfortable to talk about.
So I'll tell you why I love that, because there's a lot of manipulative people in the world, and it doesn't even have to be about physical abuse. And it certainly doesn't have to be about Trump. I think there's a bigger issue. I think that what she's talking about is exactly right. There's this instinct, not because everybody's a bad guy. She earlier said it's not even necessarily because of the old boys club. It's just that when someone is accused, everybody's uncomfortable. Like, oh my God, did he punch her in the face? But we knew him in a professional setting, and it's uncomfortable and it's awkward. So what people want to do is subconsciously, not because they're bad people, they're trained to not want to believe it. No, it can't be true. And you see Orrin Hatch and you see John Kelly in the case of Rob Porter going, it can't be. I've worked with this guy for all these years and he's a perfect gentleman to me, right? And I think that that is a huge issue that is not talked about enough, where we all want to just get past it. So for decades and centuries, etc., especially women have not been believed because it's more convenient and less awkward to not believe them.
Right, it's more convenient because you don't have to take action against someone that you know based on those allegations. It's easier and more convenient to just not believe or distrust the people who are bringing forth those accusations, for sure. But also, I think that there are some people out there who are from a different era where it was acceptable to beat your wife. I'm gonna keep it real. And that time period was not that long ago. Remember, when we're talking about Republicans, we're talking about the political party who refuses to sign legislation like the Violence Against Women Act, which would just merely provide a legal framework in which women who have dealt with domestic abuse can go forward with some sort of legal action to protect themselves. Republicans time and time again would vote against that. I mean, why would they do that? Why would they vote against the Violence Against Women Act? I think that there's an ideology at play as well, on top of the convenience that you mentioned.
And there's also cultural shifts that are happening. We're in the middle of one now. So I don't mean in terms of abuse towards your wife. I hope that everybody finds that unacceptable now, although there's the people from generations in the past who think, what's the big deal, as you point out. But look, a lot of people still think it's okay to abuse your children.
Yeah, that's true.
We're right in the middle of it. Okay, and it's uncomfortable to talk about what degree of abuse. Those are the conversations that we have. Adrian Peterson famously, but you could pick 1,000 examples. A star NFL running back would hit his children with a switch, take skin off their back and other body parts. And a lot of people go, wait, it happened to me, it's okay. It's not okay. And part of it is so uncomfortable to talk about that you just want to go past it and get beyond it. Look, she continued along that line, and I really want to emphasize this for anyone who's gone through this. She says, then on top of that, when people don't believe you and they go to that automatic, and she says, sometimes I've gone to that automatic instinct. She said with the Me Too thing, she said, wait, is it really true? And she had those doubts, and so she's not trying to blame you. She's trying to explain the process. And she says it chisels if you're someone who's suffered it and been a victim of this. She says it chisels away at your self-esteem and self-worth until you're unsure whether your version of reality is valid or not. Oh, that's another great point with manipulators. And abusers are often also manipulators.
Yes.
They will then make it seem like it's your fault.
Yes.
And I mean, and if we acknowledge that and we understand that, we're so much more. We've gone so much more towards fixing the problem, and for so long we've never acknowledged it. So again, she's, I think, clear enough in the article. Doesn't mean that every single allegation is true, but if someone is an actual victim of abuse, for so long they have not been believed. The automatic setting was don't believe.
Right.
So she's like, can we switch it? It took so much for these people to come forward. Can we switch to automatic setting? And then of course you could rebut the presumption. And she ends with this, she says, and for any men, women, or children currently in situations of abuse, please know, it is real, you're not crazy, you're not alone, I believe you. So if you're in court, that doesn't mean that we change the burden of proof. But for when people come out, can we just do a reset and think about, okay, how have we reacted in the past, and what is the right way to react today? And to automatically reject all those cases and allegations of abuse has been systematically wrong for all this time. So if we're doing a reset here and Willoughby's a part of that, then bless her heart.
We have some updates on Harvey Weinstein. The state of New York has filed a civil rights lawsuit against Harvey Weinstein and the Weinstein Company. This happened as the Weinstein Company was expecting a sale to the tune of tens of millions of dollars. But what's interesting about this civil rights suit is that we now have even more gruesome details regarding the allegations against Harvey Weinstein and notably his staff, who, according to this suit, enabled him and allowed this predatory behavior to continue. Now, the suit was filed by New York Attorney General Eric Schneiderman in New York County Supreme Court late Sunday, and it alleges violations of the state's human rights, civil rights, and business laws. I'm gonna go through some of the allegations that are noted in this suit. They're, of course, not all of the allegations, but in my opinion, some of the more notable ones, some of which we haven't heard of before. Now, according to the suit, Weinstein regularly berated women using gender-based obscenities, calling female employees all sorts of expletives that you can see on the screen there, instead of using their first names when he was angry. He also allegedly threatened the lives of his employees, saying, quote, "I will kill your family," and quote, "You don't know what I can do." He apparently also bragged about his political connections and how he had friends in the Secret Service and that how they can basically take care of him on any issue.
I want to pause there, Anna, for two reasons. One is on the first quote about calling people an expletive is one thing, and within the context of the work environment, bad enough. But to use it as their name, to use the C word as the name of the women who work for them, that sent a chill down my spine. I mean, it's just new layers of the monstrous behavior every day.
Yeah, and it gets worse. It gets
it's gonna get way worse in a second. But on the allegations of him saying, "I'll have you killed or your family killed," now you say that's preposterous. That's over the top. It's not a movie producer's not gonna have you killed. But remember this context: Weinstein would get things done that didn't seem possible. He would have movies win Oscars that had no business winning Oscars. He would manipulate and change the dynamics of Hollywood over and over, and people saw it. If he said you were gonna get a role, you'd get a role. If he said you weren't gonna get a role, your career was over. So in that context, that those threats become a little bit more credible.
Right, and remember, Ronan Farrow had also published this incredible piece about how Weinstein would do Oppo research on the women that he had already victimized in a way to intimidate them so they wouldn't come forward with the accusations. And also, if they did come forward, it was a way of slandering them to the point where no one would take them seriously. So, if someone like that said to me, "I'm going to kill you and your family," yeah, I would be terrified, and a lot of his employees were. Now, the suit also alleges that the management and board at the company were repeatedly presented with credible evidence of Weinstein's sexual harassment and his use of corporate employees and resources to facilitate sexual activity. Now, the reason why that's mentioned in the suit is because part of his company is also dealing with this because they feel that the suit alleges that they did not do enough to protect these employees, that they essentially enabled this type of predatory behavior. Also, Weinstein berated a female employee in 2012, threatening to, quote, "cut her loins." I mean, these threats are terrifying. Let's go to the next one. The company employed one group of female employees whose primary job it was to go with Weinstein to events and facilitate his sexual conquests. They were called Weinstein's wing women. By the way, so there were apparently 3 groups of female employees that he had, all 3 of which were given the job of facilitating predatory behavior, according to this suit, by the way. The second group of women were compelled to take various steps to further Weinstein's regular sexual activity, including by contacting friends of Harvey and other prospective sexual partners. Now, members of this group at various times allegedly had to handle Weinstein's erectile dysfunction shots and even administered the injections. Others had to prepare rooms in his office for sexual activity and clean up after it was over.
Oh, I don't know which part of that is worse.
All of it, all of it. The third predominantly female group had to facilitate Weinstein's sexual activity by meeting with prospective sexual conquests and then following through on the employment opportunities promised by Weinstein after. Because remember, one way that he would lure women into his hotel rooms or on dates with him was by promising to further their careers.
And by the way, also to crush their careers if they didn't abide by it. So first of all, on the cut her loins comment, remember this is a guy who's accused of physical assault and rape. Sometimes he'd just barge into a room, even when the woman was trying to close the door, and then rape the woman involved. And there's over 50 allegations of different kinds of sexual harassment and assault all the way up to rape. And so if he threatened to do physical violence against you, sometimes that threat was carried out. And then in terms of the women who worked for him, one, you should not make blanket assumptions about anyone that worked at those companies because you don't know if they were involved in this or not. And number two, keep in mind that he also threatened everyone else who worked there. So you don't know how he threatened these women to get to be the quote unquote wing women. And it wasn't just women. Drivers were always told to keep condoms whenever Harvey came into Los Angeles or New York. And also keep the erectile dysfunction shots available in the car if he needed them. And so, unsurprising that he is acted out in these ways due to some insecurities likely. And I mean, anyway, so I just when you think Harvey Weinstein can't get any worse, the idea that he would assign women the job of giving them the erectile dysfunction shot, before he went to harass or assault women, then he would have other women decide to either further or kill the careers of the women who wouldn't sleep with him. And then finally, the cleanup role. Oh, Jesus, it's heartbreaking, man.
Yeah, he saw all of these people as disposable, as, his playthings, women were there for his pleasure and his pleasure only. I mean, he is as disgusting as can be. And his lawyer did release a statement in regard to this lawsuit saying that while some of his behavior was uncalled for, he denies the accusations that have been listed in this suit.
And by the way, this is not a random person trying to get rich. This is the New York Attorney General. He's a very serious guy. And he's following up on what is some of the worst human rights abuses that I've ever heard of at a company, as well he should, that's his job. I don't know what the statute of limitations on some of these crimes, alleged crimes are, but I hope to God somebody's looking into that, because if he hasn't run out of the statute of limitations, there's plenty of apparent criminal activity here to pursue as well.
We gotta take a break. When we come back, more news for you, don't wanna miss it, so just come back.
Go.
They'd rather lose to Republicans than have a progressive win with them. That's how dumb the corporate Democrats are.
It's the Democrats who lull you to sleep, and at the end of the day, they're the ones who push the right-wing agenda.
This is why you lost to Trump, you fucking moron. What the fuck is wrong with you? Whoever wrote that, I'm sure they were typing with one hand and going like this with you. The Democrats are dead. The way you feel right now, that's how a chump feels. Do not freak out.
every once in a while now, we're gonna do live ads for you guys if you're watching on the live stream. I'm live right now. See this? It's not on video. Why would I put this into a video? It wouldn't make any sense. So this is for aspiration.com. They're a sponsor because they're deeply progressive, arguably more progressive than me. Their founder explained to me at great detail what's awesome about the earned income tax credit. You should look into that. They give 10% of their revenue to charity. I mean, libs through and through. So if you got a bank, they probably got your money in oil companies, defense contractors, pharmaceutical companies, private prisons, right? So these guys keep your money clean. No defense contractors, no oil companies, and no private prisons. So and on top of that, they actually give you an excellent interest rate, 1%. I can't get that anywhere else. Go look around. You won't be able to get it anywhere else. No minimum monthly requirements for your monthly balance or your monthly deposits. There's no monthly service fee. It's outrageous how liberal they are. Okay, so if you want to feel comfortable about where you have your money and where you do your banking, aspiration.com. It's not an accident that they're our sponsor. We like what they're proposing. We like their services. Plus, this is the thing that always gets me: free access to every ATM in the world. So if you happen to be in Vegas, I don't know anyone who might be in Vegas, you know how they charge you like $28 to take money out? Aspiration, being the libs that they are, pay that for you. No ATM charges anywhere in the world. And Money magazine has called them the best checking account in America. I mean, what else do you need? Okay, so if you're frustrated with your bank, which a lot of us are, and you want to keep it in a place where it's clean, that's going to actually give you the most amount of money, let you set your own fees, then go to aspiration.com. You literally can't ask for anything better. And so I'm going to keep on telling you about them because this is exactly the type of people we want to work with. People who are going to look out for you guys and be the progressives that we're all striving to be. So, and on top of that, they give 10% of their money to charity. Amazing. All right, so get out of the big banks, go to aspiration.com. Thanks, guys. All right, back on the Young Turks, Jen Canana with you guys. Andy Rink writes in, Republicans are at work using a strategy called starving the beast. They run up the debt, often with tax cuts for the rich, and then cut social programs to make up the difference. 1,000,000,000% right, Andy. That's exactly right. They've been doing it for decades. At this point, we've been around so long, we've been talking about it for decades. So if you're, well, the tickets are sold out, so it doesn't matter if you're in LA, but if you're anywhere in the world and you want to watch our Sweet 16 birthday party, we're even gonna have cake, by the way.
Are we?
Yes, nice. And whoever's there is also gonna get the cake. And I'm gonna cut it in a unique way. So this is all fun. Become a member, same thing, $10 to get in, those are sold out, but $10 for a membership per month. So you could sign up and then cancel, it's up to you, I'm keeping it real. Anyway, go to tytnetwork.com/sweet16 to sign up to become a member and watch that. Okay, and then the last one is Kara says, I don't know what to do, but there needs to be something done that scares guys away from ever hurting someone again. These actions are so unacceptable. Kara, there was a thing called prison that people used to go to, but now the rich have found a way around it. So somehow these rich guys who've done this abuse, none of them are in prison.
Well, we got to save those prison beds for the real criminals, you know, the ones that get caught with drugs.
Yeah, people who smoke marijuana. That's what the prisons are filled up with. It's fucking maddening. All right, anyway.
All right.
What's next?
The remains of a suspected poacher were found in a wildlife reserve in South Africa. The poacher, or alleged poacher, was attacked by a pride of lion, or a lion pride? Pride
of lions? I don't know.
What's the right
Lions.
phrasing?
They got 'em.
By lions, okay.
In fact,
ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
Yeah, I mean, the guy died.
Okay, so let me give you the details. According to reports, it seems the victim was poaching in the game park when he was attacked and killed by lions. They ate his body, nearly all of it, and just left his head and some remains. That is a police spokesperson who released a statement about this. Now, the reason why they suspect he was a poacher is because he had a loaded weapon, and it's unclear whether he was looking to poach lions or if he was there to poach rhinos, because rhinos are usually poached in the area that he's in. And the reason why poachers go after the rhino is because they want the horn. Rhino horn is used in so-called traditional medicine. It doesn't actually work to cure anything at all, but some people in some countries think that it does. Last year, several lions, though, were found poisoned near a farm in the same province with their heads and paws sawn off. So.
And by the way, lion body parts are sometimes used in traditional medicine as well. So, look, on the one hand, it's gruesome. All there's left is a rifle and a guy's head. On the other hand, cutting off lions' heads and paws is also gruesome, and doing that to rhinos. And sometimes they cut the horn while they're still alive.
Oh, God.
Sometimes they kill them and then cut the horns off. And so poachers are the second most guilty here. The most guilty are the people who buy this crap.
That's right.
And so, look, I'm torn on whether to have any sympathy at all for that guy.
So let's talk a little bit about our thought process in regard to this story, because during our production meeting, this story comes up, I pitch it, and at first, neither one of us had much sympathy for the victim here, for the person who lost his life. And then a very good point was brought up regarding how he could have been living in poverty, desperately needed the money, and then there's the market for this type of stuff, for the rhino horn, for the lion paws, because they think that it will cure their ailments or whatever it is. And so then I started feeling a little bit of sympathy for the guy, because if you're poor and you know that there's like this black market that you can make decent money off of, I mean, what are you gonna do? Are you gonna feed your kids or, have your principles? So I don't know. I don't know much about the guy. We don't know much about the victim. In fact, they can't even really identify him at the moment because of the fact that he only has a head left and it's hard to identify who he is. Now, with that said, though, you're absolutely right. The people that you should have no sympathy for are those who keep buying these animal parts. We're not talking about big game hunters who do this legally. We're talking about poachers illegally murdering these animals and then selling these body parts to people who think that it's going to cure them from illnesses.
And it's slightly worse than that, because sometimes it's to cure illnesses and sometimes it's because they think it's going to make their penis larger. It's true.
Yes, it is true.
And so, look, I don't know that makes it worse, but it feels worse. But that's really stupid. And it's one thing if you're desperate for cure to cancer because your aunt has cancer. It's another thing if you're desperate for an extra inch and you're willing to slaughter these animals to get it when there's absolutely no evidence that would even help you. Even if it were to help you, that's the wrong thing to do, etc. And of course it doesn't help you, of course it doesn't. And so, look, the other thing about poachers and hunters to some degree is, well, you signed up for something. You signed up to kill lions in that particular case. They get to fight back.
How many terrible things have happened in the world over men who have been insecure about their penis size? I feel like a lot of terrible things have happened. Just chill out with your penis size. Like, no one really cares that much. You care way more than everyone else does.
Yeah, so look, if you signed up to go kill wild animals and it turns out they killed you instead, at a bare minimum, that's part of the price of that game. And they didn't have guns, you did, so it is what it is.
All right, moving on. A major corporation is threatening to pull advertisements from Facebook and Google if these tech giants don't do something about extremist rhetoric and also fake news. Unilever is the corporation that is now threatening to pull its ads, and for good reason. They're concerned about the fact that consumers no longer trust the content on these platforms. In fact, the chief marketing officer for the corporation said the following: "We cannot have an environment where our consumers don't trust what they see online. It is acutely clear from the groundswell of consumer voices over the recent months that people are becoming increasingly concerned about the impact of digital on well-being, on democracy, and on truth itself." So I have a little bit of an issue with that second statement that I just read to you, because pick what you're concerned about. Because if you're concerned about propaganda, fake news, that kind of stuff, I totally understand. Extremists, that kind of stuff, I totally understand. But well-being on digital, what does that mean? I don't know what that means.
Yeah, look, this is not particularly Unilever. You could even give them credit for at least saying it out in the open. But a lot of advertisers are panicked over this, but some of the terrible consequences that flow from that are, they go, okay, anything that mentions racism is out. It doesn't matter if it's pro-racism or anti-racism. So a lot of websites and videos are getting demonetized, even though they're fighting against the terrible things, bigotry, racism, sexism, etc. Now, if you're a right winger and you're like, oh, that's terrible, man, advertisers should be forced to advertise on my channel or my blog, even though I hate black people or Muslims or whatever. That's not how capitalism works. If you're a right winger, you should look into capitalism. And part of the reason that they don't want to advertise with you is because you alienate their customers. There's 1.6 billion Muslims in the world. You might not like that, but that's a fact. Those advertisers have to sell to those Muslims. They also have to sell to gay people, black people, Hispanic people, etc. So I get it if they say, look, I don't want to advertise in a place that is against most of my customers, right? It is unfortunate that they are not, I think that they're not being clear enough and just saying, I'm worried, I'm just going to get out of it completely. And it's not right that TV doesn't have a bias. TV also has a bias. It's an establishment bias. And no one ever calls them out on it. So the reality is this is hurting a lot of people on digital media that shouldn't that are collateral damage here, and that should have nothing to do with this. So I hope that the whole system and industry can fix this in a way that is reasonable, so advertisers get what they want and the customers still get good videos and websites. I think it's possible. All right, we gotta go. Bye-bye. All right, welcome to Rebel Headquarters. We got a great show for you guys today. We've got an American hero that I talked about earlier on the Young Turks live here at Rebel Headquarters. Before we get to that, and two other great guests, by the way, including a best-selling author who's deeply progressive. I just want to do a quick story for you guys, an update that's really important. The Washington Senate has overwhelmingly passed Senate Bill E3 SSB 6353. Okay, what is that? That's automatic voter registration in the state of Washington. That is wonderful news. It's wonderful news for democracy, potentially good news for progressives, but much more important than that is the fact that it gets more people involved in the process, and it's great for democracy, great for voting rights. Oregon did this, it worked wonderfully. Oregon Governor Kate Brown signed it in 2015. Currently in the state of Washington, nearly 20% of eligible voters are not registered, and automatically registering them will make a big, big difference. Now it's not over. The partner bill has to go to the House and get passed there in Washington, but it is likely that that will happen. And in Washington State's governor is Jay Inslee, and he has promised to sign it. In fact, he requested the bill, so that's really good news. By the way, if you're scoring at home, all the Senate Democrats voted yes. Half the Republicans voted yes, and half of them voted no. So great news out of Washington. And if you live in the state of Washington, go help them pass that in any way that you can. Bring that home so that more people are allowed to vote. And it doesn't matter which way they vote. The most important thing is that we all participate in our democracy. Okay, now let me go to aforementioned American hero. In the state of Virginia, we had a dramatic showdown on Friday. Lisa Lucas went down to the West Virginia Assembly and she gave them a piece of her mind, and it was actually a very simple gesture. She just started reading their donor names, and of course they shut her down. And Lisa joins us now on Rebel Headquarters. How are you?
Hi, Cenk. It's nice to speak with you.
Great to have you here. Like I said earlier on the Young Turks, I already called you an American hero. I'm probably going to do it a couple more times. Before we get to that, before we get to what you're campaigning on, which is also very interesting, I do want to show, in case some of the audience didn't see it, a small portion of that showdown in West Virginia, and then we'll talk about it. Let's watch here.
His money comes. First energy, next care energy. I want to finish. Drag me off.
And they did. They dragged you off. So, what was so offensive about what you were saying at the West Virginia House of Delegates there?
I was trying to suggest that perhaps the delegates who are taking that kind of money from the industry should recuse themselves on these industry bills.
Wow. And did you yell at them?
No.
Did you personally insult them in any way?
I simply read off data from their own campaign finance reporting.
If they were so deeply offended that you reading the money that they had taken from corporate interests, what do you think would have been the logical thing for them to do?
Not take the money.
It sounds so simple, doesn't it? And but yet they decided, no, they're going to take the money. They're going to keep the money. They're going to vote on that bill that affects the people that they took the money from, but they're just going to kick you out. Problem solved. And they cut your mic.
Yeah.
So
yeah, well,
you know, look, Lisa, I love what you did, and I read that you say you're an introvert, but you gathered up the courage to do that anyway. I love that even more because that means you're a true fighter. But I think like there's some chance you should go further. I mean, they physically assaulted you there. I mean, it wasn't the end of the world. They didn't, but no, they did. They pushed you.
The guards were extremely professional. They could have escalated things, and they didn't. They were very nice guys. I sat and talked to them for maybe 30 minutes. I mean, little thinking, but 30 minutes before the paperwork came out where you could sign up for a speaking slot, and I hold no ill will against them at all. I actually felt bad. I felt as if I I had probably given them a terrible morning.
Yeah, but listen, they gave us a terrible morning. And look, I know the guards are doing their job.
Not the guards.
Yeah, no, I know. Look, the guards are doing their job, and you're a wonderful person for looking out for their interests when they were pushing you around. But it's not a good job to physically remove citizens from their own, legislatures. You guys are supposed to be in charge. So anyway, but the guards are a minor issue. The legislators are the real problem here. And if they can't take the heat of just simply reading their donors, then maybe they shouldn't have the donors, which is exactly your point. What were you doing? Like, what's your job before you decided you were frustrated about money in politics? You did this, now you're gonna run for office. But what's your day job?
I work for a company that provides rare breed chickens and designer chickens and chicken diapers. I wrote a book called the My Pet Chicken Handbook. It's a strange, I suppose, job, but basically I got to work online and take egg gathering breaks and garden and compost chicken poo, and it was paradise.
I don't know about paradise, but look, I didn't know that. I saw some of the things that you've done in the past, but I didn't know that that's what you were working on now. But you know why you do that? Because you're a real person with a real job, and that's what we all have to do. And so what I love about Rebel headquarters is that we have real people running for office, and it seems so foreign. Like the rest of the media is like, that's so weird. Real people instead of millionaires running for office, it doesn't compute for them. Yeah, so, okay, so you're doing your job, and I see the other things that you worked on, taught English in China, dug up dinosaur bones in Utah, worked at a local paper, a national window manufacturer. Like any American, I mean, it's slightly more interesting jobs than maybe the average cat, but it makes sense. And so as you're doing all that, what animated you about money in politics?
I think probably just the fear of the invasion, because I live in the middle of the Marcellus Shale. It's a very beautiful area, and we've had gas and oil for many years. Most people in my area are grateful for gas and oil. They're not opposed to drilling, but they want to be able to determine what contract they want, what the lease terms will be, where the well pads will be, what kind of royalty they want, or if they want a bigger upfront bonus. And that's reasonable for them to determine that with their own property. And the corporations don't want to have to pay the kind of money maybe that they're asking, or they don't want to, say, have to put an access road in that costs more than the one they'd like to put in through someone's hunting field. It's just a matter of property rights.
So there's two issues there, right? One is the property rights issue, and on that issue, that is arguably equally liberal and conservative. In fact, at the national level, I think conservatives have fought even harder for those property rights. So if the people in the House of Delegates represented their conservative and progressive and moderate citizens, wouldn't they be for more property rights, not less?
Yeah, and there have been Republicans in the West Virginia legislature, particularly the Freedom Caucus, the kind of libertarian leaners, who have been fighting against bills like this and fighting for property rights right along with some Democrats. And there have been some Democrats who are taking that money and voting the wrong way along with some Republicans. So it's not a party issue at all. It's a matter of, it's not Republicans versus Democrats, it's more corporations versus the rest of us.
Say it ain't so. Democrats taking money and doing what corporations ask them to do. And I would never hear of such things.
Surprising.
Yeah.
Never heard that before, I'm sure.
Right. Well, the second issue is the clean water. It's the same thing that Paul Jean Swearengin is running on against Joe Manchin. And it seems to me, again, a fairly benign request to say, can we have jobs and not poison our children at the same time? And it seems like a lot of times the guys backed by corporations, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, go, no, you got to pick one or the other. So, to what degree has your message of we can also have clean water and jobs resonated in West Virginia? How frustrated are people by that?
Well, I have canvassed a lot in my rural district, and that clean water is the biggest issue. When I ask people, I tend to ask, I'm kind of stupid. I started out with this like long 20-question questionnaire, which was ridiculous. But I quickly learned my lesson and I got it down to one question. And the question is, if you could have your delegate working for one thing, what would that one most important thing be? And the answer most often is clean water. And it's not necessarily an issue of the extraction when they're talking about that. It's the fact that some places in West Virginia have basically Civil War era public water systems. And I have a friend who was a city councilor for a small local town of about 300 people. And he told me that the job of the city council was to get in a wet hole in all weather and try to fix pipes. And that was their job. They got paid $25 a month. And these are old retired guys a lot of times just trying to keep the town going because there's nothing else for it, you know?
You said $25 a month. Do you mean $25 an hour?
I mean $25 a month, and the mayor gets $100 a month.
Jesus. Okay. Man, West Virginia is as real as a heart attack. So look, you, Lisa, like everyone I've talked to, the candidates from West Virginia don't fall neatly into buckets, Democrat, Republican, et cetera. And so you're a big believer in constitutional rights. What does that encompass for you?
I just think that you should be able to do what you want as long as it doesn't interfere with someone else's trip.
How's that for simple? Okay, all right. I gotta ask you one last thing here as we run way over time, but how often do I get to talk to an American hero? You've got women's issues here on your list, but you also have men's issues on your list of priorities.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I think in that regard, I talk about parental rights. West Virginia has some problems with the family court system, and this has traditionally been seen as a men's issue, although I see it more as again, a parental rights issue, where I think men have been often in the past the non-custodial parent, and so they don't often get as many rights to see their children as they should. So to me, I want to equal that out.
It's near impossible not to like you, Lisa. Okay, so everybody, here's all the links and how you could help her. There's the website, you should check it out. I love the headline on the website, "A holler from a holler." I can't get enough of that. And then
that's what I did.
That's right. That's exactly what you did on Friday. And then there's the donation link and of course the volunteer link. And all those will be down below if you're watching on YouTube. Just click on the links. On Facebook, it'll be in the comments section. Go help a sister out and bring democracy back. You want uncorrupted politicians? Then work for them, volunteer for them, donate for them, fight for them. And you're looking at one right there. So, Lisa Lucas, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Cenk.
All right. Man, that warms my heart, man. We keep fighting, we're gonna win. You just gotta get in there and fight, just like she did. All right, when we come back, we've got two people who've written the book on democracy, and I think you're gonna love that. So come right back. All right, back on Rebel headquarters, two more great guests for you guys, so let's do it. Now joining us is Francis Moore Lepay and Adam Eichen. They have written a new book called Daring Democracy, Igniting Power, Meaning and Connection for the America We Want. They're also part of the Small Planet Institute. And Francis, to be fair, has only co-authored 19 books. And one of the books, Died for a Small Planet, only sold 3 million copies. So, I mean, what would you know about writing good books? So let me start by asking you guys a really simple question. What's this book about?
What's the book about?
Yes.
Well, it's about our passion for democracy that we believe is absolutely essential to every other need and crisis our country faces today. And it's about the movement for democracy that we feel very privileged to be part of.
And it came out of Democracy Spring, where we actually met you 2 years ago when we were walking the full distance, 140 miles from Philadelphia to Washington, D.C. And that's where we realized that there really was a movement for democracy out there. And so we wrote this book, we put our heads together and we said, you know, how did we get here, one? And two, what are the solutions? Three, is there a movement? Is there really a movement out there? And we said yes. And so our book describes that. We want to give light to the democracy movement.
So I love that you guys were out there in Democracy Spring and that we were out there together. We got arrested together, and that was to get money out of politics and fix our democracy. So, but as you wrote the book, what were some of the lessons that you learned from that? How are people trying to regain our democracy, and what can people learn from that?
Well, the big surprise for us in a way was, I want to go back to the roots. I mean, we really got to focus on how we got here, which we feel is so essential, because if we don't know how we got here, we can't get out. So I just wanted to spend a moment there, that we call it the anti-democracy movement, because it has been a very conscious, deliberate strategy to basically delegitimize government and to make us feel that our government just can't possibly work for us. And that's been very undermining, as well as the whole strategy of rigging the rules of our democracy to silence those who might disagree with this agenda.
And that ranges from voter ID laws to unleashing money in politics to corporate lobbying. There's a bunch of different things that we outline, but it's very clear that it's trying to limit the voices of everyday Americans and really augment beyond belief the voices of those who have money.
And we are not conspiracy theorists. This is all based on the public record. It is just a very well-funded effort to turn us against government and to make us feel powerless.
And each other. And each other. Turn us against each other too.
Absolutely.
That's key.
Yeah.
And so, but we want to really emphasize that our book is 60% about solutions. And so really we tell the story of those out there that are still too invisible. Reforms that are actually getting to the root of the problem, because they are displacing this power of money over our system and replacing it with the power of real people who are just out there willing to serve. And so for example, we emphasize the state of Maine, because they are so brave and such leaders, where they've confronted the problem through public financing of elections that began in 2000. After they were told, oh, no, it can never work, it can never pass, it did. And so people who, like a friend of mine, a waitress in Auburn, Maine, she became a very stellar legislator because she could run with public money.
And you see it across the country too. I mean, there are solutions to these problems. I mean, that's the key, right? It doesn't take a genius to figure out how to fix our democracy's problems. We know the solutions. The key is just implementing the reform.
Yeah, I can see why you guys wrote a book together. You're almost finishing each other's sentences.
We spent a lot of time together over the past year.
Yeah.
There's no question about it. And we're 49 years apart in age too, and we agreed on every single word in the book.
Every single word in the book.
How many years apart?
49.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really? God.
We're not just
generations.
We are intergenerational, right?
Okay, Adam, no offense, but Francis, that's amazing. You look amazing. So that's unbelievable. Okay, so now look, on the issue of the money and the politics and setting us against one another, I was reminded of a couple of things as you guys were talking. One is, we're worried the Russians set us against one another by funding propaganda on far right and even sometimes on the left to get us to fight. But they're kind of amateurs at this. The donor class has been doing that for decades.
Absolutely, absolutely. Through think tanks and educational institutes, funding of schools, deregulation of media. I mean, one of our big core things about the anti-democracy movement has been manipulating the mindset. I mean, they've been at this for 40 years, trying to change the way Americans think about government and about the market and about all this stuff. I mean, getting their ideology into the American, ether has been one of their major strategies. So the Russians are new to this, but the anti-democracy movement has already mastered this.
And making politics so nasty that we don't want anything of that. Do you know that Newt Gingrich in the 1980s said that our political struggle has to be fought with the duration of and the savagery of a civil war? I mean, come on. It's incredible. And they really preach that you don't treat your opponent in the other party as a legitimate contester for, a policy. It's an enemy to destroy. And so there was a real nasty element introduced.
Yeah, and another quote from back then is from Grover Norquist, to your other point about starving the beast. And Norquist, who's runs the main group who pushes for tax cuts for the rich, said we want to shrink government so small that we could drown it in a bathtub. And unfortunately they did in New Orleans and Houston. And today Trump revealed his budget, which after giving $1.5 trillion to the rich, or actually they gave about $6 trillion to the rich, but creating $1.5 trillion deficit, turned around and said, sorry, we don't have any money left for you guys, and I'm gonna cut things, including Medicare.
Right, but the key thing here, though, is that despite all of that, Americans across the country are rising up, including in states like South Dakota, which is extremely conservative. They voted for Republicans in 80% of all statewide elections in its history as a state. And they passed the Anti-Corruption Act, and then the legislature overrode it, and now they're fighting again against the legislature. And you see this across the state, whether it's in San Francisco or South Dakota or Seattle, Washington. You see it all across the country, and we outline it, and just the chutzpah that these citizens have to be fighting against this anti-democracy movement is amazing. It inspires us every day.
So you guys talk about that, and I do want to emphasize that, because in my experience, whether it's Young Turks or Wolfpack or Just Democrats or anything else, it seems to me that the number one tool or weapon that the bad guys have is hopelessness.
Absolutely.
Hopelessness. Yeah, I emphasize that actually hope is not for wimps. It's not some cop-out.
Right.
Hope actually, neuroscientists tell us, it reorganizes our brains toward solutions. So hope is a form of power. And that's why these stories have to be told. And these are regular people. These are not, some crazy activists. These are just regular people who want meaning, who want a voice, and who want to connect with their neighbors. And so they do the most creative things. I mean, one of the other things that we write about is the campaign for ranked choice voting in Maine, so that you don't end up with somebody less than a majority winning. You actually can vote your conscience. And you know what they did there? They taught people about ranked choice voting by having beer contests in their
beer elections,
beer elections in their famous breweries.
Really creative strategies across the country to try and teach democracy, and that's exactly what we need. And this isn't Pollyanna hope, right? This isn't just, we're not just pulling this out of the blue. I mean, these are real success stories across the country that no one is talking about, and that everybody should know about, because this is where we get our hope if we're ever going to, take back our democracy.
And in California, one of the big things that makes people feel crazy is the unfairness of the way our district lines are drawn, so that, as the saying is now going, that politicians can choose their voters instead of the other way around. But in California, I just heard this beautiful story from the actors involved, a 14-member commission now, an independent commission that is setting the lines. And they went through such an incredibly beautiful, complex, democratic process to make it bipartisan, to make it reflect the whole state. to make it really participatory. And
they took the power out of the politicians' hands.
And they had 100 gatherings around the state where people could give their opinions about where the lines will be drawn. And Adam and I met somebody who participated in one of those participatory feedback sessions with the commissioners, and his view, his opposing view, was accepted by the commission.
Citizen power.
Citizen
Go
power.
figure.
And I loved it. I loved it.
So it's something that I see every day on this particular program, Rebel Headquarters, whether it's Katie Fahey in Michigan who organized to end gerrymandering, got 425,000 signatures, which could have cost millions of dollars, did it for free with over 1,000 volunteers in Michigan to end gerrymandering in that state ballot initiative. Represent us fighting in South Dakota on the exact issue that you guys talked about and getting conservatives and progressives to vote together for the first time. I haven't yet seen the beer democracy guys, but I gotta call them. Okay, that's next on my to-do list because that's a democracy I can get behind. So, and I love what you guys wrote. Courage is contagious, and that's exactly what I see in Wolfpack. So it starts with one person, and then two, and then four, and then next thing you know, it's a mountain army. And the lobbyists can't stand up to it. So that leads to really the final question here, which is, okay, you see all these disparate things that are going on in the country, you report on them, and that's wonderful. Did you guys get a sense of a path to victory? You see what I'm saying by that? So all those people are fighting in their own way against gerrymandering in California and Michigan, et cetera. But was there one thing that stood out to you guys as, okay, this could be the heart of the solution?
Well, I think that I'll answer the question very quickly, and then I'll let Frankie jump in. Is that the real key for us is that this is a movement of movements, and it's that people are coming across all issues to fight for democracy. And again, I'm cutting the question a little bit here, but I think the key is that by coming together both across all democracy issues and coming across all issues in favor of democracy as well, we really are creating a very viable and strong movement.
And that is what is new. And now, I was 74 this weekend, and I can say with some authority now that I have some age that this is important. It's the first time in my life I've ever seen this happen with this movement of movements. So the Democracy Initiative, for example, has 63 organizations for democracy, for these reforms, representing groups as, from NAACP to labor to the environment, and 30 to 40 million people just in that one coalition alone, the Democracy Initiative. And so we've created a field guide to the democracy movement so that people can feel that there is this sweeping, powerful spirit growing, and it has a map on it where you can go to your state and see what campaign is underway there that you can participate in.
And each reform leads to another reform. I mean, but each victory that we win, it builds more citizen power to the next victory, because we know there's no silver bullet. So I think that's really the answer. There is no silver bullet, but each victory is the citizens clawing back up to reclaim their democracy. It makes it one step easier, and that's exciting.
Yeah. And just seeing things like that happen today, that the guest we had on before you guys at Rebel Headquarters, Lissa Lucas, just going and standing up to the politicians in West Virginia and just reading their donor list. They cut her mic, but you know what? It got the whole nation's attention. And now people know their donors way better than they ever would have if they just let her speak. And so it's American heroes like that. Although, Francis, I am a little worried you're hurting your credibility by claiming outrageous things like that you're 74. So
I am so proud I was born in the war on poverty, so I know what it's like to make progress.
Okay, I want everybody to check out smallplanet.org. That's their website. Francis is the founder of that, and Adam is the democracy fellow there at Small Planet Institute, but website smallplanet.org. But also, most importantly, of course, in this context, check out the book. It's called Daring Democracy, Igniting Power, Meaning, and Connection for the America We Want. Francis, Adam, thank you so much for joining us at Rebel Headquarters.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, what fun, thank you so much.
All right, looking forward to getting arrested with them again one day. And one day we will get that money out of politics. Courage is contagious. All right, post game's next for the members. tytnetwork.com/join to become a member. We'll see you there.